Chapter 411. The police arrived very quickly, but the people from the Messier 87 department arrived even faster. Mr. Run, the person who arrived, didn't look too good. Hey, you can't blame me for this. I have a bad temper and will get angry with anyone who provokes me. It's already good enough that this person is still alive. Rin Baqian spread his hands. As he spoke, he got up and limped out. Yo, yo, yo. Rin Baqian sounded like he was singing hip-hop. As he walked, he screamed and sucked in cold air. It hurt. The gunshot seemed to have hit a bone. He had never been a tough guy who would pretend to be fine even if he was shot. He wanted the whole world to know that he was suffering from a minor illness, let alone a gunshot wound. Only then did the person notice the gunshot wound on Rin Baqian's body. Why did you hit yourself? The Empress saw that Rin Baqian was in so much pain and still couldn't understand why he had hit himself. Rin Baqian was speechless and couldn't be bothered to explain. Soon after, the police arrived. However, the people from the Messier 87 department interceded and didn't do anything to Rin Baqian. When the Messier 87 department understood the whole story, they didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Such a small matter had caused such a commotion. Fortunately, nothing major had happened. The doctor didn't die, but she was a little frightened. This was considered a lesson for her. They didn't like this kind of doctor. No one wanted to meet such a doctor when they were sick. Rin Baqian felt that he had suffered a loss. He had to treat the Empress's teeth. Others were fine, but he was shot. By the time Rin Baqian went to a nearby hospital to take out the bullet and bandage it, the Messier 87 department had already found a dentist for the Empress. Not only did they find a dentist, but even Yang's son personally rushed over along with several people from the laboratory. They were also very interested in some of the Empress's data. They usually didn't have the opportunity, but they definitely wouldn't miss such an opportunity. Even a strand of the Empress's hair was very valuable to them, not to mention her teeth, saliva, and blood. If they were lucky, they could get them all this time. However, they wouldn't say this in front of Rin Baqian. Instead, they said that they were here to help the dentist. After all, the Empress's identity was special, and her situation was special as well. It would be easier for her to resolve any problems that might arise. This time, there weren't any accidents. After an old doctor took a look at the Empress's teeth, he smiled and said in a relaxed manner, "She has grown wisdom teeth. They usually grow between the ages of 16 to 25. However, there are some who have grown wisdom teeth beyond this age, so it's not a big deal. However, one of them is an impacted wisdom tooth. Its growth has been blocked by other teeth, causing some inflammation. It is recommended that it be removed." No way. The Water Empress rejected him without hesitation. Her phoenix eyes were wide open. She would chop off the head of anyone who dared to pull out her teeth. "I'm afraid you won't be able to eat sweets anytime soon," Rin Baqian said unhurriedly. The Empress, she hated this sentence from him the most. It's best to listen to the doctor. Wisdom teeth are useless, and if they grow crooked, it will affect the other teeth. Just think about those white rabbits. They're still waiting for you, Rin Baqian said softly as he held her hand. "Are her other teeth okay?" Rin Baqian asked. After all, the Empress loved to eat sweets so much. He was really afraid that one day, the Empress would get cavities. Even though the Empress was so strong that even the tip of a knife couldn't hurt her body, it was hard to say when it came to things like bacteria and viruses. "There isn't any problem with her other teeth," the doctor said. Rin Baqian then felt relieved. "Now, you only have two choices. Either you pull it out and eat whatever you want, or you don't pull it out and you have to endure the pain. Furthermore, you can't eat sweets, and I'm afraid you can't eat anything that's too cold or too hot either. You have to choose between temporary pain or permanent pain," Rin Baqian said to the Empress. The Empress looked extremely conflicted. After a long time, she endured the pain and nodded her head slightly. The extent of her nodding was very small. If one didn't pay attention, they wouldn't be able to tell. "Get ready to help her pull it out." Rin Baqian saw her expression and decided to strike while the iron was hot. He didn't have any psychological burden regarding the matter of the wisdom teeth being pulled out. No matter what, It was better than the Empress being depressed for the past 2 days and being unhappy with everything she ate. The biggest problem now was that the Empress had already nodded her head, but could the teeth be pulled out or not? Zixiao, she's here to treat your illness. If she offends you in any way, please don't slap her to death, Ren Baqian whispered into the Empress's ear. Ren Baqian whispered into the Empress's ear. He was afraid that the Empress would accidentally slap this old lady to death. When Ren Baqian spoke, his breath blew into the Empress's ear, making it a little itchy. But now, her mind was filled with the matter of the tooth extraction, and she couldn't care about anything else. To her, the tooth extraction was more serious than the attack of Great Xia and the Yun nation on Dayo. All of you, get out, the Empress said after a while. All of you, get out, Ren Baqian said to Yang Sun and the rest. They're my assistants in case anything happens. Yang Sun pointed at the other two and said, they have to get out too. Ren Baqian didn't give them any face. And you, the Empress poked Ren Baqian's waist with her finger. Half of his body was numb. The Empress didn't want anyone to see her when she pulled out the tooth. After Ren Baqian got out, the door was closed from the inside. The Empress was lying on the bed in the room. She wasn't used to the light shining on her face. Relax, it's just a tooth extraction. The old lady laughed. She only knew that the person in front of her had a special identity. Otherwise, she wouldn't have looked for her. But no matter how special the person was, the tooth still had to be extracted. With her more than 40 years of experience, this was simply a small matter that could be solved in a few minutes. However, she met with trouble at the first step. What's this? The Empress looked at the syringe that the old lady brought over and asked. It's an anesthetic. It won't hurt after a while. The old dentist was in a relaxed mood as she pricked the syringe into the Empress's gums. She used force, continued to use force. Her forehead was sweating. What made her flabbergasted was that the syringe couldn't penetrate the Empress's gums at all. Crack. The syringe broke slightly. The old lady's hand trembled, and the broken syringe went straight down. It's over. The old dentist was alarmed. With such strength, she was afraid that the gums would be pierced through. However, what she didn't expect was that when she pricked the syringe, it didn't even pierce through the skin of the Empress's gums. The Empress squinted her eyes and raised her eyebrows. Her entire body was overflowing with murderous intent, and she resisted the urge to slap this person to death. Just by pricking her gums with such force, she should have been slapped to death even if she couldn't hurt herself. Sorry, the syringe broke. The old dentist wiped the sweat off her forehead. Before she could use a pair of forceps to remove the broken syringe from the Empress's mouth, the Empress spat it out and stuck it into the ceiling above. Following which, the old dentist tried her best, but she couldn't inject any anesthetic into the Empress's mouth. The Empress began to feel a little impatient. To her, leaving her mouth open and letting others play with her teeth was extremely humiliating and damaging to her dignity as an Empress. Furthermore, the other party took such a long time to do it. The old dentist had a strange look on her face. Who was this girl in front of her? Even the syringe couldn't penetrate her gums. They were like steel. Was she really human? She even doubted whether she could extract her teeth. She was frightened. After a long time, the dentist asked cautiously, "Let me see if I can extract your teeth without using anesthetic." She felt as if she had come into contact with something extraordinary. How was this person in front of her human? She was basically a monster in human skin. Forget it. Tell me the location, and I'll do it myself. The Empress sat up from the bed. At this moment, she understood that this person probably couldn't extract her teeth. She was too weak and was like an ant. The dentist's expression became even more strange. The patient came to her, but she couldn't do anything about it. She even had to extract her own teeth. If this matter were to spread, her reputation would be ruined. However, she really couldn't extract this tooth. Now, she actually hoped that the other party could extract it for her and not make her do it. She didn't dare to do it anymore. Following which, under the guidance of the dentist, the Empress stuck her finger in and found the wisdom tooth that had just emerged. She pinched her finger hard on the gums and pulled out the tooth. It was simple and crude, but the price to pay was disastrous. That part of the gums was almost crushed by her pinch, and her mouth was full of blood. However, she didn't care. Instead, she sized up the wisdom tooth in her hand, threw it into her mouth, and swallowed it. This was one of the toughest parts of her body. How could she throw it away so casually? The dentist's eyeballs were about to pop out when he saw the Empress's series of actions. She pulled out a tooth that was only showing its head with her bare hands. How'd she do it? Even if it was her, she still needed to separate that tooth from the gums, loosen it, and pull it out. Renbachien stood in front of the door when he heard the sound of the door opening. He saw the Empress walking out from behind the door. How is it? Have you extracted it? This was what Renbachien was most worried about. He always felt that the Empress's tooth wasn't that easy to extract. However, he had no other choice but to give it a try. Let's go, the Empress said. The blood in her mouth dyed her mouth even redder. She was also feeling a little down. She was very distressed about that tooth of hers. Why is there so much blood? Renbachien was startled and his tone became somewhat unfriendly. His body was overflowing with murderous intent. After killing so many people in the other world, even though his murderous intent wasn't as strong as that of the Empress and some Aboriginal warriors, it was still much stronger than most people on Earth. The atmosphere outside the room froze in an instant. It's all right. She can't extract it, so I did it myself. The Empress explained faintly and walked out without looking back. She was still distressed about that tooth of hers. Oh, the murderous intent on Renbachien's body dissipated. He put his hands in his pockets and followed behind the Empress unhurriedly. After he left, Yang's son heaved a sigh of relief. Just now, he was really afraid that something bad would happen. Soon after, a group of people hurriedly entered the room to inquire about the situation. When they found out that the other party's tooth couldn't even be pierced with a needle, and that the other party used her bare hands to extract that wisdom tooth, everyone was a little surprised. This kind of body was really too strong. With the Empress's speed and strength, they always thought that the Empress's physical strength was very strong. However, at this moment, they realized that it was actually much stronger than they thought. Everyone was in high spirits. The other party's physical strength also represented that an Earthling could reach such a level after training. However, the tooth and blood that they wanted to obtain were completely absent. Regardless of whether it was the tooth or the blood, they were all swallowed by the Empress, leaving nothing behind. I want to eat ice cream. The Empress sat on the sofa and stared at the television intently. Your Majesty, do you still feel any discomfort in your mouth? This was the third day on Earth. I'm fine. Bring me ice cream. I want jollots, the Empress reminded him. A moment later, the Empress held an ice cream in her hand and ate it in a few bites. Bring a few more. Another one. I want more. Renbachien was speechless. There was a row of ice cream sticks on the coffee table. Are you trying to make up for the desserts that you haven't eaten for the past few days? However, he was finally able to confirm that the Empress was indeed fine. That evening, Renbachien returned to Dayo. Renbachien began to boil cotton candy, while the others hung candies on the tree. The Empress held a pair of long scissors and stood under the tree with bright eyes, cutting the candies. Another week later, a group of people escorted the Empress's imperial carriage out of Lan City and headed straight for the south. In addition to the Empress, Renbachien, a large number of guards, more than 40 students from the academy, and a small number of officials for various departments. There was a majestic total of 400 to 500 people. Although they were here to resolve the issue in the south, there were still many other things to do. When the Empress went on patrol, all the pedestrians she saw along the way stopped and stood on both sides of the road to greet her. There wasn't much on their eyes, but respect. The only regret they had was that they couldn't see the Empress's true appearance. At this moment, Renbachien and the Empress were sitting opposite each other in the imperial carriage. Qing Yuan and Hong Yuan were both standing behind the Empress. Renbachien looked at the two cards in the Empress's hand and pondered deeply. He looked at the expressions of the three people and continued to ponder. After a while, he drew a card from the Empress's hand and laughed. He placed the pair of queens on the ground. Your Majesty, you lost again. Renbachien raised his eyebrows. The Empress glared, raised her eyebrows, and had an unfriendly look on her face. "Your Majesty, please close your eyes." Rinpoche smiled. It was time to enjoy the benefits. He played with the Empress for the whole day. First, he would draw a card as a ghost. This way, both of them would draw the base number of cards. After drawing all the pairs, both of them would draw the remaining cards from each other's hand. The last person with the last card would lose. Up until now, this was Rinpoche's 13th consecutive victory. The Empress snorted and closed her eyes unwillingly. Her face was slightly red. Hee. Rinpoche's laughter made the Empress want to slap his head. Rinpoche gently leaned toward the Empress. Looking at the Empress's heroic face, he felt a surge of passion in his heart. Such a scene was something that countless people dreamed of. Rinpoche and the Empress's faces were getting closer and closer. The Empress could already feel the airflow brought about by Rinpoche's breathing. Qing Yuan and Hong Yuan turned their heads to look at both sides as if they were looking for something. Rinpoche's obnoxious laughter finally stopped. With a speed that was as fast as lightning, a note was pasted on the Empress's forehead. On the note was a crooked drawing of a turtle. Chapter 412. Actually, there were all kinds of opinions about the recent plot. Some people felt that it was okay, some people felt that it was very lame, and some people felt that it was very poisonous. To be honest, I was also a little affected. Sometimes, after writing a chapter, I would be in a good mood. After resting for a while, I would look at the chapter in the comment section. When I saw some people saying that this was not good or that was not good, I would immediately lose my mood and reconsider whether there was a problem with the plot or not. To be honest, this book was written in a relaxed style. First, I had to let my mood relax. Sometimes, when I was disturbed, I would be affected much more than when I was writing other types of novels. I wasn't even happy myself, so how could I write something that was happy? Although I really wanted everyone to like it, it was impossible. There would always be people who liked this kind of chapter and hated that kind of chapter. I couldn't satisfy everyone. So, in the future, I will not comment anymore. I will write my own, according to my own ideas. Whatever I write, everyone will read. If I can't read anymore, I can only say sorry. In addition, I have always wanted to update to 3 chapters. 2 chapters is really too little. I will try my best. By the way, some people said that what happened in the hospital in the previous chapter was unrealistic. In fact, it couldn't be more realistic. Perhaps some people hadn't encountered it before, but this kind of situation was really quite common. All kinds of impatience, deadpan faces, very harsh tone, all kinds of situations. It was not uncommon for people to think that they were better than others because of their work. Some people went to the hospital to see a doctor and just said one sentence. The doctor did not look at anything else. While playing with his phone, he absent-mindedly asked you to do a bunch of messy tests. The patient quarreled with the doctor and almost beat him up. The doctor said that this was how he treated people and that his medical skills were like this. This was what happened in our province's Class 3 Grade A hospital in 2017. The hospital was one of the best in the province. As for other kinds of things that happened in the various hospitals, there were too many. I have encountered it myself, and it was very annoying. So, I was lucky not to encounter it. Chapter 413. Oh yeah. It had been 3 days, and Rinpoche had won 67 times in a row. The Empress was plastered like a mummy, and her face was densely covered with small notes. Every time the Empress moved her head, the notes would rustle. Again, the Empress gritted her teeth. At first, she was just playing, but now, Rinpoche had no choice but to play. She didn't believe that she couldn't win even once. Your Majesty, a small gamble is good for the mood, a big one is harmful, and a strong one is destroyed. Rinpoche laughed mischievously. It was quite fun to paste notes on the Empress's face and see her gnashing her teeth in anger. After all, the Empress always had a cold face. Even though she was losing so much that her eyes were red, she still looked more human. Let the Empress win another 3 to 5 rounds. Rinpoche pondered for a while and estimated that it was about time. He could see that the Empress was almost at her limit. If he continued to play, he would be the unlucky one. He was able to win 67 times in a game that relied purely on luck. Besides good luck, it was also because Qing Yuan and Hong Wan's expressions were too recognizable. They looked at one of the cards anxiously. Drawing the other card would definitely not go wrong. Every draw would be accurate. These two fellows didn't even know that they had betrayed the Empress. Oh yeah, good luck. Ren Baqian drew another card from the Empress's hand, put on the ground, and laughed. Your Majesty, it seems that your luck isn't good today. Why don't we play another day? Ren Baqian said with a smile. Now that the Empress's eyes were red, how could she play another day? However, she still had to show her attitude. Let's play another day then. The Empress's eyes were originally wide open. It was unknown what she thought of, but she suddenly changed her expression and said faintly, Ah. Ren Baqian was slightly surprised. He didn't expect the Empress to stop just like that. After all, there were all kinds of people who were red-eyed after losing. Tie him up for me, the Empress said faintly. Your Majesty, what are you going to do? Ren Baqian was shocked. You want to run away after winning for 3 days? How can it be such a good thing? The Empress slapped Ren Baqian to the ground. Qing Yuan and Hong Wan were gloating as they tied Ren Baqian up tightly. Is it fun? The Empress sat cross-legged in front of Ren Baqian, who was tied up like a dumpling. As she asked, she tore a piece of paper from her face and pasted it on his face. You've been winning happily these 2 days, haven't you? Your Majesty, right? Your Majesty this, oh yeah, it's just a pet phrase. You want to run away after winning? I'm just asking casually. The Empress had a look of resentment on her face. Within a few minutes, Ren Baqian's face was plastered so tightly that his face couldn't be seen. Following which, she hung one end of the rope that was tied to Ren Baqian on the roof of the imperial chariot. With a tug, Ren Baqian was suspended in midair. Your Majesty, we can talk things out. Why don't you let me go first? Ren Baqian didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Now that the Empress had pasted paper slips all over his face, he couldn't see anything. Even when he panted, the paper slips in front of his nose and mouth moved up and down. This was truly karma. When others lost, they wanted to win it back. But this fellow actually made a move to exact vengeance. This isn't how we play around. 4 days after leaving Lawn City, everyone arrived at the side of a large river. It was indeed a large river. The river was at least 5 kilometers wide, and they could only see the other side from afar. Feeling the water vapor and hearing the sound of the flowing river, Ren Baqian walked to the riverside cautiously. Previously, he was almost swallowed by the White Dragon River. He was in awe of the rivers in this world, especially with such a large river. He didn't know what kind of creatures lived in it. Sure enough, when a guard went to the riverside to wash his face, water splashed everywhere. A crocodile that was more than 10 meters long emerged from the river and bit the guard. The huge size of the crocodile made it look very intimidating. When it opened its mouth, there was no doubt that it could easily tear a person into pieces. Boom! That guard smashed the crocodile's mouth, grabbed its upper jaw, and swung it into the air before smashing hard on the ground. Following which, he pulled out his knife and threw it at the crocodile. This series of actions was very quick, and the others only glanced at it and didn't care. That guard also looked relaxed. To Ren Baqian, this was a ferocious beast, but to them, it was just an ordinary creature. However, the next scene made the guard's face turn green. He saw that the crocodile turned around and quickly rushed into the river. It also understood that it had found the wrong prey. Ignoring its injuries, it just wanted to escape back into the river. My knife! That guard widened his eyes and cursed. He jumped over, grabbed the crocodile's tail, and swung it hard on the ground again. Bang! 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 That crocodile was swung around like a broken sack. After a few swings, it seemed like it was still alive. Let me remind you, your knife seems to be bent, Ren Baqian said unhurriedly. That guard's movements immediately froze. He saw that the knife that was stuck in the crocodile's back had been completely deformed after being swung around. My knife. Has anyone eaten this thing before? Is it delicious? Ren Baqian stood at the side and ignored the guard, who looked as if his own son had died. Instead, he was excited. He had heard of crocodile meat, but he had never eaten it before. The ingredients in this world were generally good, and this made him look forward to eating crocodile meat. "It's all right, it's quite chewy," someone at the side said. "Peel off the skin first, then roast it later." When everyone was having lunch, Rinpoche smelled the alluring aroma of the crocodile meat. He felt that his saliva was about to flow out. However, Rinpoche frowned. He had chewed a piece of crocodile meat until his cheeks were sore. It wasn't just chewy, he felt that he was chewing rubber products. Bah! Rinpoche spat out the crocodile meat. This thing was really not meant for humans. However, when he turned to look at the others, they only chewed a few times before swallowing the crocodile meat. Especially for the Empress, the crocodile meat was no different from tofu in her mouth. Just by looking at her eating movements, it made people feel that this meat must be tender and smooth. This was the difference brought about by the disparity in strength. Not only was it reflected in individual strength, but it was also reflected in various aspects of the body. Even the range of eating, there was a huge difference. "Sir Rin." A guard came to Rinpoche's side and revealed a shy smile. This kind of expression on the burly guard was like a burly man with chest hair, leg hair, and a full beard wearing a sailor skirt. It made people want to beat him up no matter how they looked at him. "What's the matter?" Rinpoche had an impression of this guard. He was also a guard from the palace, and was usually a man of few words. Rinpoche's main impression of this guard was that he had a mouthful of teeth that went in and out like a husky. No two teeth were in the same line. "It's like this, I fancy a lady and want to marry her." That guard rubbed his hands and looked as if he was talking about something that was difficult to say. "Then marry her." Rinpoche was puzzled. Why was he asking him? But she said to wait for her next life. "Sir Run, can you teach me how to do it?" That guard scratched his head. His shiny white scalp was falling like snow. If he was asked to chop someone, he naturally wouldn't say anything. However, in this aspect, he was a little puzzled. After thinking about it, it was more reliable to ask Principal Run. No matter how he looked at it, he was an expert in this aspect. It could be seen from this that such a weak person could make Her Majesty fall in love with him. She has already decided to be with you in the next life. It's obvious that she is interested in you, Rinpoche said with an encouraging expression. Is that so?" That guard hurriedly asked. "Of course." "Then why didn't she agree?" "Maybe she has some difficulties that are hard to say," Rinpoche said after thinking about it. This reason was really not easy to find. For example, she is seriously ill and doesn't have long to live. This kind of thing happens often. Some women get seriously ill because they eat too much kimchi or something happens to their family, and they can't be together with the person they love. As a result, they can only make a promise to be with him in the next life. From this point of view, she is a very strong woman. However, which woman doesn't want someone to share her worries and difficulties when she meets with trouble? Therefore, since you already know her feelings for you, you must not give up. No matter what excuses she comes up with in the future, it's just because she doesn't want to trouble you and wants you to give up on your own. However, in her heart, you will definitely have a place for yourself, and she has expectations of you. No matter how strong a woman is, even if she has already said so, everyone wants to be abandoned. After Rinpoche's guidance, that guard became spirited. He was prepared to go back and carefully investigate the problem that the lady had encountered. After solving the problem, he would be able to win the heart of the beauty. Chapter 414. This river was called the 19 Rivers because it had a total of 19 bends. Other than the source, the narrowest part of the river was a few kilometers wide, and the widest part was hundreds of kilometers wide. After walking west along the 19 rivers for a day, they finally arrived at their first destination. The canning factory, the hydraulic forging workshop, the blast furnace, the new cement factory, and the glass factory were all in this area. After all, this place was rich in hydraulic resources. Moreover, 3 days after disembarking from the boat, they would then head north for another 4 to 5 days to reach the Protectorate of the Northeast, and 3 days south to reach the Protectorate of the Southeast. If they continued to follow the river, they would eventually pass through the Chun Nation and enter the sea. Apart from having to be careful of all kinds of strange things in the water, this was a good place. If they could open a north-south canal in the future, they would be able to reach Lawn City or even further north. If they were to head south, they would be able to reach the southern region. Then this place would really be amazing. Looking at the map, this plan was completely achievable. The premise was that Dayo's maps, which were miles away from the real world, were reliable. In 8 to 10 years, this place might be like the Pudong New District. At worst, it would be like the Xiong and New District. Before they arrived at the canning factory, they could see some people fishing along the riverbank. Their fishing method was very unique. A group of people squatted at the edge of the water dozens of meters apart. They cut their fingers and stuck them into the water while holding a barbed spear in their other hand. Every once in a while, someone could be seen retracting his hand at lightning speed and stabbing the spear into the water. When a spear was pulled back, a big fish that weighed dozens of kilograms could be seen struggling on it. The next step was easy. First, they tore off a piece of meat from the fish, put it into the water, and weighted with the spear. Along the way, Ren Baqian saw at least thousands of people doing this. From time to time, he could even see a crocodile being stabbed into the water with a spear. The aquatic resources in this river were too rich. With such a simple and crude method, one person could catch at least a few hundred kilograms of fish in a day. After a large number of large carnivorous fish were killed in one place, large carnivorous fish from other places would quickly fill up the gap. After countless years of accumulation, this river seemed to contain endless resources. Rinpoche and the Empress stood by the river and watched for a while. The two figures stood side by side, while the others waited at a distance. "This is the treasury," Rinpoche said as he pointed at the rippling river in front of him. It was a pity that Dayo had not made good use of it. The food produced by this river alone could feed hundreds of thousands of people without any pressure. This was mainly because the people of Dayo didn't like to eat fish because of the fish bones. To the people of Dayo who were used to eating meat, it was a very troublesome matter. However, using the pressure cooker to make canned food was a good choice. When the production increased, it could be put on the market. In the future, we can open up 2 canals to connect the north and south. Regardless of whether it's transportation or traveling, we can save a lot of manpower and material resources. Rinpoche told the Empress about his fantasies. As for the manpower to open the canal, it was naturally the Yun Nation. At present, he had already found several new jobs for the people of the Yun Nation, including building roads, opening canals, and mining. Let's not talk about the treasure vault first. From what I know, the new barracks have a lot of resentment towards you, the Empress said as she looked at the river. Why? Rinpoche was puzzled. He did not have any dealings with the new barracks. They have already been eating fish for 2 months. They joined the army to eat meat, not to eat fish. The Empress felt that it was a little funny. There were 2 batches of 40,000 new recruits in the new barracks. If one had to choose one person that they hated the most, it would definitely be Rinpoche. Just because of one of his ideas, they had been eating fish for 2 months. They could still accept eating fish occasionally, but now they had to eat these things every day. It was imaginable how heavy their resentment was. At present, the new barracks could be said to be full of complaints. Rinpoche spread his hands. This was something that couldn't be helped. After all, Dayo wasn't rich in food. It was already good enough to have something to eat. Those refugees who were affected by the war in the north were still eating grass. Those refugees who were affected by the war in the north returned to their villages to see their fields that were in a complete mess. The livestock farming in the north was slightly worse than the livestock farming in the south. Most of the time, they would sell the vegetables produced in the fields at the market to supplement part of their meat. And those crops that were planted in the fields were destroyed. They could only dig wild vegetables and a small amount of meat to barely fill their stomachs. Even though they wouldn't starve to death, they wouldn't be full either. In their words, they were eating grass. However, it was still better than eating soil. It would take at least a few months for them to recover to their pre-war state. Next, the group of people first arrived at the canning factory. The so-called canning factory wasn't big. It only had a few big sheds and 1,000 people. There were piles of firewood everywhere in the courtyard and a large amount of waste from the fish. From afar, one could see the smoke rising from the canning factory. It seemed that the fire was going on 24/7. The fish caught from the river were stewed and stuffed into glass jars that were as tall as a person. Then, the jars were covered with animal skins and sent to the new barracks that was half a day's journey away. And when they got closer, they could smell an extremely strong fishy smell. A few hundred meters away from the high-temperature cooking area was the place where the waste from the fish was stored. A large number of fly-like creatures were in this area. When people walked around, they would be startled by a dense black mass. Seeing such a situation, Rinpoche's eyebrows knitted together. Dirty, messy, and poor. It made people nauseous. Could the food made in this way be eaten? Is this how you make food for the recruits to eat? Rinpoche frowned and questioned the person in charge of the canning factory who came to welcome them. That person looked at the Empress and then at Rinpoche with a strange look on his face. Yes, are you willing to eat it? Rinpoche asked. I eat this every day. That person still didn't know what Rinpoche was trying to say. Rinpoche looked at that person's innocent face and was so angry that he didn't know what to say. This is for the mouth. Can't the food be cleaner? Let's not talk about being dustless. At least make it cleaner, Rinpoche said bitterly. Sir, we will do as you say. That person finally reacted, even though he felt that Rinpoche was making a big fuss over a minor issue. The people of this era had a completely different standard of hygiene from modern people. Just like how third brother wiped his butt with his left hand and ate with his right hand, most people in this country couldn't accept it. Rinpoche and the others stayed here for 3 days. Rinpoche formulated a complete set of hygiene rules, including that everyone had to wash their hands before touching the ingredients, that the fish waste had to be dragged far away to be disposed of every day, and that they had to use vines to weave curtains around the sheds to prevent flies from entering. Although the things that Rinpoche had requested weren't done when he left, he was already prepared to come back and take a look. After all, this was the first food processing factory in Dayo. It was necessary to set up hygiene rules, and everything would be handled according to them in the future. Next, everyone went to the hydraulic forging workshop. There was a row of wooden water wheels by the river. As the water wheel rotated, the bearings drove 2 giant hammers up and down, repeatedly smashing the iron plates below. The loud noise made it difficult for people to hear, even if they shouted at a close distance. Your Majesty, this thing is too convenient. The blacksmiths can only swing a hammer that weighs 15 kilograms for an hour at most before they have to rest. This thing could be used 24 hours a day, driving 2 hammers that weigh 50 kilograms to strike continuously. 1 water wheel is equivalent to nearly 100 people. The official from the Ministry of Works who was in charge of the hydraulic forging workshop couldn't hide his joy as he said. There were a total of 6 such water wheels here, and they were still in the process of being built. To them, this kind of hydraulic forging was a pioneering work, and its effect was enough to inspire people. Chapter 4:15. The 19 Paths Riverside was originally a barren land with hardly any signs of human habitation for dozens of miles. However, 2 months ago, it had become popular. All kinds of wood and carts of cement were piled together. Before ordinary people knew it, Dayo's first batch of factories were built here. Countless ox carts and carts came and went every day. In addition to the fish from the 19 rivers, which were cooked at high temperatures and sent to the new barracks, there were also quartz sand, borax, boric acid, barite, barium carbonate, limestone, feldspar, and all kinds of other stones sent from afar. It was a lively scene. Correspondingly, there were also 2 new barracks dozens of miles away, where 40,000 new soldiers were receiving training. When Rinpoche arrived at these 2 new barracks with the Empress, the attention he received was second only to the Empress. It's that guy, right? Just strangle him to death with 1 hand. It should be him. This bastard hit him with a stone. He's courting death. Her Majesty is here, although I also want to hit him with a stone. Countless people were cursing in secret. They joined the army to eat meat, but they ended up eating fish every day. There were some bones in the fish that weren't stewed well, and their throats were often pricked. Furthermore, the taste wasn't good. This was all because of this lad's rotten idea. It was simply too wicked. Ever since he arrived at the entrance of this barracks, Ren Bachien felt hostility from all directions. It came from those muscular, bronze-skinned, and ferocious-looking new soldiers. Although the Empress had already warned him, they were all hostile. Their gazes were like steel needles stabbing into his body, and it didn't feel good. "I'm quite innocent," Ren Bachien whispered to the Empress, feeling very wronged. "Now, so many people don't even have enough to eat. I came up with a way to ensure their food and nutrition. It's fine if you don't thank me, but you actually treat me with hostility." This was really a case of a dog biting the hand that feeds Lu Dongbin. "I'm not really innocent. After all, this idea was yours," the Empress casually replied. But under the circumstances at that time, it was already very difficult to provide rations for 20,000 new soldiers, let alone 40,000 new soldiers, Rinpoche complained. "If I didn't do this, I wouldn't be able to provide rations for 40,000 new soldiers, let alone other things." Rinpoche felt even more wronged. "That's why you came up with this idea." The Empress changed the way she put it. "Your Majesty, I'm doing this for the sake of the nation." Rinpoche was completely depressed. He felt that he had been wronged. Then he came up with this idea, so they didn't hate the wrong person. "Rinpoche, can we still chat?" But no matter what, he was the one who came up with this idea. These new soldiers joined the army to eat meat, but in the end, they ended up eating fish every day. Regardless of the reason, the idea was Rinpoche's, and they naturally hated him. In a certain aspect, it was not wrong. Rinpoche was helpless. "I'm doing this for the sake of the nation." The Empress seemed to have inadvertently grabbed his hand and squeezed it as a form of consolation. Then, they parted ways. The Empress said softly, "You can't expect everyone to understand that much." The Empress moved very quickly, but this small movement was seen by many people. All of them looked up at the sky and pretended that they didn't see anything. Rinpoche knew that the Empress was right. Even in modern society, not everyone could understand reason, let alone in such a backward world. The targets of education were those who had never studied before, and it was the first time in their lives that they left the mountains. Rinpoche understood this, but it didn't stop him from feeling wronged. These were two different matters. The Empress took a tour around the two barracks and looked at the situation of the barracks as well as their drills. The first barracks were obviously better than the second barracks. At least, it wasn't as messy. Furthermore, they looked more imposing during the drills. The first barracks were the first batch of new soldiers that had been training for more than 5 months. After the Empress's inspection, they were going to break camp and head to the Protectorate of the Northeast. The new soldiers in the second barracks still had to go through another 4 months of training. After a total of 12 days, the Empress's imperial carriage set off again and headed for a ferry upstream. There were already 3 big ships waiting there. It was indeed very big. It was about 40 to 50 meters long. There were 3 floors on the deck of the ship, and it was about 20 meters tall. The ship itself should be very luxurious. There were carvings in many places. However, it was unknown how long this ship had been in use. The hull was already very old, and some places could even see patches. At the lower half of the ship, there were many long oars that protruded out to propel the ship forward. "Be careful, Your Majesty." When Rinpoche saw that the Empress was about to go up the gangway, he eagerly went up to support her. The people around him rolled their eyes. Even if this ship was twice as tall, it would only take an instant for Her Majesty to go up. Why would you need to be so attentive? The Empress's face showed that it was superfluous, but she actually enjoyed it in her heart. Rinpoche touched the Empress's arm through a thin veil. He didn't have any messy thoughts, but instead carefully looked at the gangway below his feet. Every time he stepped on it, it would tremble, making him wonder if the gangway would suddenly break. When he reached the deck, he saw the entire view of the ship. It was indeed magnificent. With the productivity of this world, such a big ship was considered a colossus. However, the ship was the same as what he saw below. Although it was clean, it was very old. "Du Laolu, be careful." Why is this ladder trembling so much? I feel like I'm going to fall. "Help! Tai Sun, quickly come and help me." 2 soft voices came from behind him. Rinpoche turned his head and looked over the side of the ship. Du Laolu was standing on the gangway and winking at a young man below. He took out his gun. Bang! Ah, teacher, I was wrong. Du Laolu put his hands on both sides of his legs, stood there with his head lowered, and said honestly, a man should never say anything no matter how dangerous it is. You know too much, Rinpoche said faintly. Bang! Ah! Many people below watched as Rinpoche's figure disappeared from the side of the ship. They silently repeated his words a few times in their hearts. These words must be remembered and mustn't be forgotten. These words were imposing. Rinpoche stuffed the gun into his waist, walked back to the Empress, and asked, where did this ship come from? He didn't think that the style of this ship was different just because it was built by Dayo. The carvings were exquisite, and the paint that had fallen off hadn't been repaired. Rinpoche had an idea. Could this ship have been left behind by the Hao Nation? That was at least 70 years old. One had to know that this ship was in the water, and it would have rotted after being soaked for 70 years. Zhuyu sent it here. It's quite old, the Empress said. Rinpoche thought about it. Zhuyu was the Protector General of the Protectorate of the Southeast. He heard that there were many rivers in the Qin Nation, so there was no need to explain where this ship came from. It's time to change. This ship isn't very safe on the river, right? Rinpoche stepped on the deck, which made a creaking sound. Zhuyu is already looking for a suitable ship. Once he finds one, he will send it back. Rinpoche was speechless. There was no need to ask anything else. He simply didn't consider where to order it or whether it would be sold. He reckoned that Zhuyu would place a knife on the other party's neck, throw a tael of silver, and ask the other party if they wanted the ship or money. Those who could board this kind of ship probably weren't ordinary people. From the looks of it, they were definitely asking for money. The speed of the ship wasn't fast. It took about an hour to cross the river that was more than 10 kilometers long. However, it was very smooth and there wasn't much turbulence. Rinpoche and the Empress stood at the bow of the ship and heard singing coming from afar. The waves of the long river rise from beneath your feet, and the waves go to the ends of the world. When the voice reached Rinpoche's ears, he could only hear these two sentences. What was strange was that the singing didn't come from the other side of the river, but from a place parallel to the ship. Rinpoche turned his head and looked around. Finally, he saw a small dot in the distant river. Or rather, on the river's surface, there was a person who was gliding toward the other side of the river. He was heading in the same direction as Rinpoche and the others, but was only a few kilometers away. If it wasn't for the singing, Rinpoche might not have discovered the other party. Yes, gliding just like ice skating. Although he couldn't see clearly, the other party was extremely fast and obviously wasn't swimming. Gliding on water? Rinpoche was shocked. He didn't expect to see such a person in Dayo. Give me the binoculars, Rinpoche called out to the guard. Soon, Rinpoche saw the other party's full appearance through the binoculars. It was a man wearing a purple robe. His age and appearance couldn't be seen clearly, but he could clearly see that the other party was indeed gliding on the river. Furthermore, his hands were behind his back, and he was looking up at the sky. The wind was blowing at his clothes, and his posture made it seem as if he was about to ascend to heaven. Just this posture alone wasn't that of an ordinary person. After taking a closer look, Rinpoche had a strange expression on his face. He saw a piece of wood floating in the water under the other party's feet. There was a rope tied to the front end of the wood, and in front of the rope was a flying sword. It was more than a meter above the water surface, and it looked like a cow or a horse pulling the wood and the man on it forward. Chapter 416. When you see a person walking on the water like an immortal, you will generally feel particularly amazed. Not to mention other things, just the person's posture and manner of doing things at a glance. You can tell that he is an expert, the kind that is very high, at least a dozen stories high. However, if there was a flying sword pulling a rope in front of him, the image that had just been erected would immediately collapse. Ning Kai-chun, Rinpoche immediately thought of this name. He was the only sword master that he knew. Moreover, sword masters were rare to begin with. At their peak, there were only a few hundred sword masters roaming the world during the Age of Chaos. Under normal circumstances, there would only be around 100 sword masters. In such a vast world, Most people wouldn't even see a single sword master in their lifetime. Rinpoche quickly shook his head. It shouldn't be him. It was another sword master. Named Saichen's, but wasn't that high. Rinpoche touched his chin. He felt that his train of thought was a little off. The other party was very fast. In the time it took to drink a cup of tea, he arrived at the opposite bank from the middle of the river. He first stepped on the back of the wood, then flipped in the air and grabbed the front end of the wood with both hands. When he landed, he placed the piece of wood, which was about the length of a person, on his head. It was as if he was performing acrobatics and walked away. He didn't care about the 3 big ships here at all. His speed wasn't slow. He didn't even sway with such a big piece of wood on his head. Rinpoche smacked his lips and felt that something was wrong with this scene. It was a waste of his stunning appearance at the beginning. He didn't know why, but he had the urge to knock that piece of wood off his head. As for having a sword master in the same direction, he didn't feel that there was anything wrong with it. He had long heard from Ning Kai-chen that most of the time, sword masters were busy looking for various materials in the wild. Therefore, it wasn't strange to see them here. When sword masters appeared in Dayo, their targets were the various mountain ranges in Dayo or the 60,000 mountains. For a moment, Rinpoche felt that he should suggest to the Empress that the land and mineral rights in Dayo belonged to the state, and that treasures found in Dayo should be handed over in proportion. However, this idea was just a thought and wasn't practical. The rest of the journey was accompanied by heavy rain, torrential rain, and mud. There were more hills and vegetation on both sides of the river than in the vicinity of Lan City. The number of fields also began to decrease, replaced by large stretches of uninhabited dense forests. From time to time, the cries of birds and the roars of beasts could be heard. This dense forest was like a primeval forest. From the outside, one could see dense vines hanging down from the tree trunks. Occasionally, one could see a few monkeys or other animals climbing up and down. There was also a giant snake that was thicker than a man lying on the dirt road, lazily basking in the sun. These days, the meals were getting more and more sumptuous. Rinpoche ate a lot of meat that he had never eaten before, and this broadened his horizons. What is this? Ginseng fruit? During the break, a group of students ran into the forest to hunt for treasures. Not long after, they heard the roars of the beasts inside becoming more intense. Then he saw a student with a face full of scratches running back with 2 fruits in his arms. "I'm just taking a look." When Rinpoche saw the unfamiliar fruit, he curiously went up to take a look. It was fist-sized, jade-white, and sparkling and translucent. Like a shrunken head, its facial features were clear and distinct. One of them was crying, and the other was laughing. There were even 2 leaves on it. Ginseng fruit. Rinpoche was surprised. This fruit really looked like a human face. "It's the skullcap fruit. Is it delicious? It can eat a person's tongue." That student was very happy. This fruit was very rare and couldn't be found in Lan City. Even though his face was scratched by a few monkeys, it was worth it to obtain 2 skullcap fruits. "Come, let me take a look." Rinpoche held the 2 fruits in his hands, looked at them under the sunlight, and then put them into his clothes. "They're mine." That student's eyes widened when he saw Rinpoche's actions. "I'll give you something good to exchange for them." Rinpoche grabbed a handful of white rabbit creamy candies from the bag hanging on his back and stuffed them into the student's hands. That student looked at the white rabbit creamy candies in his hands and then looked at the 2 bulging buns in Rinpoche's arms. He wanted to cry, but had no tears. "Peel off the skin before eating." Rinpoche reminded the student when he saw him throw the candies into his mouth in grief and indignation. "Your Majesty, I found something good." Rinpoche happily carried the 2 fruits to the Empress to present. "What are these?" The Empress had never seen these things before. She was very curious when she saw the 2 fruits that Rinpoche took out. "They're called skullcap fruits. Even though they look a little unique, their taste is said to be pretty good." Rinpoche passed the 2 skullcap fruits to the Empress, and she threw one to him. Crunch, crunch. The Empress took 2 bites, and the fruit was gone. "It's indeed pretty good." The Empress nodded. "Your Majesty, you should eat this too." "I'll get someone to look for it later," Rinpoche immediately said. "Forget it." It's considered delicious to eat it occasionally. I'll get sick of it if I eat it all the time. The Empress waved her hand. Rinpoche felt that these words could be applied to candies as well. However, he appreciated the Empress's good intentions. He took a bite of the fruit. It was fragrant, sweet, and tasty. His mouth was full of saliva. A burst of fragrance entered his brain from his mouth. He finished the fist-sized fruit in a few bites. The fragrance lingered in his mouth for a long time. Sure enough, he could even eat his own tongue. After finishing one, Rinpoche couldn't forget about it. Not long after, he saw many students returning. Each and every one of them was holding a small beast or a fruit in their hands. His eyes swept across everyone's hands. It was a pity that there weren't any Katsura fruits. "Everyone, come over here." Rinpoche clapped his hands and called all the students over. One by one, they looked to their left and right. They didn't know what he was going to do. "Do you know about the Katsura fruit?" Rinpoche asked. "What is it?" Most of the students didn't know what it was. "Those who don't know can ask him." Rinpoche pointed at the student. "Cough, cough. 10 pieces of white rabbit creamy candies in exchange for 1 Katsura fruit." Rinpoche touched his waist, and a handful of white rabbit creamy candies appeared in his hand. Most of the students still didn't know what this thing was. "Are you trying to bluff a child?" The little Lolita was grabbing the ear of a babe. It was a rabbit-like creature with a large body size and a mouth full of fangs. At this moment, it was like a toy in her hands. "That isn't as delicious as the Katsura fruit." The little Lolita curled her lips. Others might not have seen white rabbit creamy candies, but she entered the palace every day. Every time, the Empress would throw a few pieces to her. Rinpoche muttered to himself. It seemed like it wasn't easy to fool her. 5 lollipops. Rinpoche inserted 5 lollipops between his fingers. It looked as if he had a few balls growing out his fist. The little Lolita looked very conflicted. She was weighing whether 5 lollipops were worth 1 Katsura fruit. "Teacher, what if I don't want the lollipops?" Dulaulu immediately raised his hand. He wasn't a child. How could he possibly like this kind of thing that kids liked? "Give me 3 points for the final exam. It will be counted as bonus points for social practice." Rinpoche decided to use his trump card. When he said this, most of the students' eyes lit up. After all, they didn't know what white rabbit creamy candies and lollipops were. However, the bonus of 3 points for the final exam was still very tempting to them. Seeing that everyone was motivated, Rinpoche added, "The final exam results will be posted in front of the school. By then, your family will know about it." At this moment, everyone revealed an eager expression. Chapter 417. Your Majesty. Rinpoche gave her 2 Katsura fruits, and the Empress gave him another one. Rinpoche felt that this was a good habit. There weren't many Katsura fruits. During their break every day, as long as it wasn't raining heavily, the students would go to the forest to hunt for the Katsura fruits. However, they only brought back 6 Katsura fruits at one time. At the very least, there were 2 Katsura fruits. Rinpoche only found out at this time that the Katsura fruits grew in pairs. Generally, a tree could only grow 6 Katsura fruits at most. Because of this output, the number of Katsura fruits was very small. This made Rinpoche feel somewhat regretful. However, there was good news, at least for the students. According to this progress, the full score for the final exam should still be 400 points. To encourage them to continue searching for the Katsura fruits, Rinpoche told them a piece of good news. The top 3 students in this year's exam would be rewarded with a certificate of merit. They could paste it on the wall at home. It was high-end and classy. These were the top 3 students in the Black Bamboo Academy and represented a glorious future. These words weren't completely deceiving them. After all, they were the first batch of students and could be considered high-level intellectuals in Dayo. Those who could get into the top 3 would be put in an important position in the future. Of course, even if they couldn't get into the top 3, they would still be put in an important position. Not only for this batch, but also for the next few years. Dayo had a huge shortage of talents. From the central government to the local governments, they lacked a lot of talents. Especially in order to advance the technological development of Dayo, a small number of such talents wouldn't be of much use. Along the way, besides Katsura fruits, there were all kinds of novel things that he hadn't seen in Lawn City. For example, there was a 3-foot-long strange snake with a bump on its head. At first, Rinpochian thought it was a flood dragon. Later on, he found out that this snake was called Shixia. It liked to appear in the evening, so it was called Shixia. After the bump on its head was cut open, a jelly-like red substance came out. It was called Danhong. It was said that eating this substance was very good for nourishing the spirit. A guard handed this substance to the Empress, and she threw it to him. It tasted like jelly, but the taste was a little lighter. As for the reaction after eating, there was no reaction at all. However, after he finished eating, the metal chain drilled out from the top of his head and coiled around his body again and again, wrapping him up like a cocoon. After the initial shock, the Empress immediately laughed out loud. After all, it was rare for her to be tied up by the iron chain in her brain. With a smile on her face, she watched as Rinpochian fell to the ground and rubbed against it like a big bug. At that time, Rinpochian felt like cursing. I was hoping that you would be able to tie others up in the future, but I didn't expect that you would be tying me up instead. What use do I have for you? Prior to this, Rinpochian had always felt that as long as he attained the spirit will level and was able to use this metal chain, he would at least be able to have more fun, such as tying things up. But reality proved that this iron chain was even more of a scam than he had imagined. Thinking about it, if he were to fight someone in the future and this thing tied him up, he wouldn't be able to die in peace. Unfortunately, this metal chain had already taken root in his mind. Before he reached the spirit wheel level, there was no way to remove it from his mind. Your Majesty. In the end, Rinpochian looked at the Empress innocently for help. After the Empress was done laughing, she grabbed one end of the metal chain and shook it. Immediately, the metal chain retracted as if it had been electrocuted. What he didn't know was that after he finished eating the danhong, there was a slight change in his sea of knowledge. This change made the metal chain feel uncomfortable, so it drilled out and tied him up tightly. Along the way, not only did he see all kinds of rare fruits and strange beasts, but he also saw some villages and towns. Even some of the styles and habits of the villages and towns were somewhat different from what he had seen before. For example, as he went further south, many villages and towns liked to decorate the surface of their houses with all kinds of feathers, making them look colorful and extremely beautiful. As for the aboriginals in these villages and towns, their foreheads were slightly larger, their appearances more ferocious, and their strength was also slightly higher. It seems to be a little different from the north. As these characteristics became more and more obvious, Rinpochian began to have doubts. There are a lot of Haishan people here, the Empress said faintly and explained in detail to Rinpochian. The so-called Haishan people was the name of a region in the 60,000 mountains. The aboriginals in the north should be called the Yinta people, and they all moved here from the periphery of the 60,000 mountains. The so-called Haishan people lived in the deeper regions. Not only were there Haishan people, but there were also the Ikeu people and the Shuyans people. In the 60,000 mountains, there were also many kinds of aboriginals. Most of them were villages in a large area and were named after this area. The Yinta people were called the Yinta people, and the Haishan people were called the Haishan people. The Ikeu and Shuyans people were the same. As a result, even though they were all aboriginals, there were still many differences in terms of customs and appearance, in addition to some similarities. Just like China on Earth, people of the same race in different regions had slight differences in appearance, height, and customs. This was the first time Rinpochian heard of this, and it was somewhat novel. However, there was one thing that was similar, and that was fighting. Originally, a few aboriginals were quarreling at the front, causing half of the courtyard wall to collapse. When the Empress's imperial carriage arrived, the few of them immediately separated and surrounded the Empress's imperial carriage. Not long after the carriage had passed, they continued to fight. Everyone was used to it, including the Empress. As a result, no one considered whether they were disrespectful or not. If the big shots in the imperial court were like this, how good could the atmosphere among the people be? In the eyes of the Aboriginals, there was nothing that couldn't be solved with a beating. If there was, then they would just beat it twice. What a familiar wooden pillar. In a town, Rinpoche rode on a fork-horned cow and looked at the crowd in the distance. Suddenly, a towering wooden pillar in the crowd attracted his attention. It was as eye-catching as a firefly in the night. That height, that thickness, and that it could move, it was clearly the one he had seen on the road. Other than him, most people wouldn't walk around with a wooden pillar that was thicker and longer than a person, right? As the carriage moved forward, he found that the wooden pillar was moving away from the crowd and soon turned into an alley. However, even though the wooden pillar was behind a wall, it was still as bright as a firefly in the night. This was because it was too tall. The person and the wooden pillar were a full 4 meters tall. Very interesting. Rinpoche smiled. He was still very interested in these sore masters. He didn't expect to see that guy again. Unfortunately, the other party didn't seem to want to meet them. This wasn't difficult to understand. After all, the Empress was the Empress of Dayo and one of the top experts in the world. Chapter 418. Rinpoche used to love bathing. Even though the Northeast had geothermal heat, it was cold outside. In the winter, he would soak in a bathhouse and enjoy a sauna, which made him feel refreshed from head to toe. When he was in university, a roommate from the South entered the bathhouse and saw everyone's bare buttocks. He was so scared that he almost ran away, which made him laugh at him for a long time. Rinpoche sat in the wooden tub. The water reached his neck, and the smell of Chinese herbal medicine wafted out of the tub. He didn't know why, but he suddenly thought of that classmate from the South. He heard that when a person started to recall the past, it meant that he was getting old. Rinpoche was deep in thought. The person who said this probably didn't experience youth. I'm only 24, 25, 26. How old am I? It's already 2019 on Earth, and more than half of it has passed. I should be 26 years old, right? According to my experience, I should only be 25 years old. Whether I'm 25 or 26, I'm still at the prime of my life. Haven't you heard of the ancient saying? The age of cardamom. I'm not even 28 years old, and it's too boring to think about this. After soaking in the tub for a while, he estimated that the time was almost up. The medicine had been absorbed into his body, and the water was starting to turn cold. He then climbed out of the tub. He stood there naked, looked down, and shook his body. Then, he picked up a towel to wipe his body and put on his clothes. There's a thick wooden stake moving outside the courtyard. A thick wooden stake was swaying outside the courtyard, as if it had a spirit. Who's there? If Rinpoche could see it, so could the guards. The 2 guards immediately jumped onto the wall. I'm here to see Sir Rinpoche. A familiar voice came from outside the wall. It sounded like a man, but also like a woman. In fact, Rinpoche knew who it was when he saw the swaying wooden stake. He just didn't expect the other party to want to see him. It just so happened that he was also very interested in the other party. Let him in, Rinpoche said while putting on his clothes. As Rinpoche finished speaking, the 2 guards pointed their chins at the person outside the wall and glared at him. Then, a person jumped onto the wall with a wooden stake and landed on the ground. Sir Rin. That person cupped his hand from afar and said, "Long time no see." Rinpoche looked at the other party's appearance. She was dressed in purple, her hair was disheveled, and her eyes were a little pink, which looked like eyeshadow. Her appearance could only be said to be above average. The most important thing was the charm at the corner of her eyes and the tip of her eyebrows. It was not something that ordinary people could compare with. After hearing what that person said, many of the guards glanced at Rinpoche with a face full of gossip. Did the victim's family come looking for him? I didn't expect Sir Run to have such a past. I wonder if I should let Her Majesty know. To be honest, Sir Rin treated them pretty well, but the truth couldn't be concealed. Rinpoche, he felt as if a bucket of sage asterisk tea had fallen from the sky onto his head. Rinpoche felt that he probably didn't know this woman, but for some reason, he felt a sense of familiarity. The tips of his eyebrows and the corners of his eyes looked familiar. You seen it before? What's your relationship with Ning Kai-chen? Rinpoche was a little puzzled. This woman reminded him of Ning Kai-chen. Ning Kai-chun has sisters? But I haven't seen it before, right? I am. I bet you didn't expect this, Sir Run. The other party winked at Ren Baqian. Puffed. Ren Baqian got goosebumps when he saw the other party's actions. You're Ning Kai-chun? Ren Baqian turned pale with fright. He hadn't changed in a few months. How'd he change his gender? Although he knew that the medical skills in this world were more advanced, he didn't expect it to be at this stage. He could even perform this kind of surgery. This is the reason why I'm here to look for Sir Ren. Ning Kai-chun pinched his thumb and middle finger. Although I'm ashamed to see anyone with my current appearance, I'm still old friends with Sir Ren. I hope Sir Ren can help me out. Ning Sai-chun's eyes were full of desire as he spoke. What's going on? Have you finally realized your childhood wish? Ren Baqian asked someone to bring 2 stools over and place them 3 meters apart. Ning Sai-chun's current appearance made him feel weird. Sir Ren, please don't tease me. Ning Kai-chun was slightly distressed. It's a long story. Ning Kai-chun sat on the chair, but the pillar was still above his head, not moving an inch. His tone and expression were full of charm. He was even more feminine than a real woman. Make it short, then. Ren Baqian immediately stopped him when he saw that Ning Kai-chun was going to give a long speech. Ren Baqian had always remembered Ning Sai-chun's habit of bragging. Even if Ren Baqian ignored him, Ning Kai-chun would still ramble on for a long time. If Ren Baqian allowed him to ramble on, he reckoned that he could brag from now until midnight. Then it would really become a long talk by candlelight. With Ning Sai-chun's current appearance, he would be hung by the Empress to dry. Ning Kai-chun looked as if he couldn't bear to recall the past. He thought for a long time and tried to organize where to start. Ren Baqian looked at his expression and simply asked, "Did you want to become like this?" Of course not. Ning Kai-chun immediately shook his head. How could he want to become like this? I see that you are enjoying it, Ren Baqian couldn't help but say. Ning Kai-chun immediately looked at Ren Baqian as if he was looking at an enemy and said, I have already become like this, yet you still tease me? In any case, we are old friends. Back then, we even spent the night together in the wilderness. He didn't forget to pinch his thumb and middle finger as he spoke, and spoke in a flirtatious tone. The surrounding guards looked at Ren Baqian with an extremely gossipy gaze. Some of them were already prepared to snitch on him to the Empress. Ren Baqian was speechless. Back then, you met a pack of wolves, okay? If it wasn't for me, you would have been fed to the wolves. Ren Baqian selectively ignored the fact that he was the one who blew up Ning Kai-chun with a grenade. Many thanks for saving my life. Do you want me to repay you with my body? Ning Kai-chun continued to throw flirtatious glances at him. No. If it wasn't for me, you would have been eaten by the wolves. Because of this, my green bead was seriously injured. Ning Kai-chun reacted after finishing his sentence. His face turned pale, and his voice became coarser. It sounded like his previous voice. However, he still didn't forget to pinch his thumb and middle finger. These days, it has become more and more serious, Ning Kai-chun said miserably, following which, his voice became androgynous again. It's useless to talk about the past. We finally have a relationship, which is why I'm here to see Sir Ren. When he said the last sentence, his expression became flirtatious again. His voice also became androgynous, following which, his expression became distressed again. Sir Ren, Ning Kai-chun, can't thank you enough for helping me this time. I will definitely repay you handsomely. Ren Baqian looked at Ning Kai-chun with an embarrassed expression. One moment, he was me. The next moment, he was me. And the next moment, he changed his expression. His voice was sometimes coarse and sometimes soft. Was he schizophrenic? Chapter 419. Recently, there has been an organization whose core members are sword masters. Someone has been issuing missions and giving out rewards. As you know, our sword master is often out searching for all sorts of resources. Now that an organization like this has appeared, many people can complete missions to obtain the materials they want. It's much more efficient than traversing the mountains to search for them. I don't know who is so generous to include most of the sword masters through such an organization. Ning Kai-chun continued to act like a schizophrenic. One moment, he was charming, and the next, he reverted to his original expression with a bitter expression. Is your current state related to this organization? Ren Baqian finally looked serious. Ning Kaichen wouldn't have mentioned this organization for no reason. Ning Kaichen became so miserable in just a few months. It must be related to the secrets of this organization, right? Was this organization plotting to conquer the world? This was what happened in novels and movies. Which world was it plotting to conquer? Great Xiao? Ren Baqian could only say that he was happy to see this kind of thing happen. Did that organization lack a staff officer? Ren Baqian felt that he was qualified to be a useless advisor. He would be the mastermind behind the scenes while a group of sword masters subverted Great Xia. It's okay. Close the door and send the guest off. Ren Baqian was waiting to hear the secret, but Ning Saichen's words made him feel as if he had eaten *tea-flavored chocolate. I can't say that it's okay. In fact, I took on a mission, but something went wrong, and I was drugged. Ning Kaichen quickly explained. Then why did you spend so much time talking about what organization you are from? Ren Baqian's eyes weren't looking at him at all. Didn't I explain it clearly? Ning Kaichen felt that he was innocent. Was it wrong to ask for help and explain it clearly? Doesn't the organization have any confidentiality agreements? It sounds like a secretive organization. Ren Baqian continued to stare at him. Nope, it's an organization that helps each other. Some people need help, some want to exchange materials, and some want to find the materials they want. Ning Kaichen explained. Ren Baqian felt that his plan to be a useless advisor had failed before it even started. Actually, I think it's good for you to be like this. As the ancients said, it's good to be a woman. You see, the clothes that women wear are much better than men's. If you want to wear men's clothes, you can wear men's clothes. If you want to wear women's clothes, you can wear women's clothes. If you want to wear women's clothes, you can wear women's clothes. If you want to wear men's clothes, you can wear women's clothes. Ning Kaichen. Besides, women can be willful and unreasonable, and no one will find it strange. There's a saying, don't try to reason with a woman. You see, women can be willful, men can't. Oh, really? This sounds interesting. The Empress's cold voice came from behind Ren Baqian. But your majesty is different. Your majesty is the treasure of this world. How can you be the same as those ordinary women? Ren Baqian's expression didn't change at all. After he finished speaking, he turned to the Empress and asked, Your Majesty, why are you here? Huh? The Empress sneered at him. I heard that an old friend is looking for you. I want to see who this old friend of yours is, the Empress said faintly. Others didn't know Ren Baqian's background, but she knew it the best. Greetings, Your Majesty. Ning Kaichen cupped his fists and said, It's inconvenient for me to move around. I hope Your Majesty won't take offense. As he spoke, he even winked at the Empress. Have you seen people curling up their pinkies when they cup their fists? Ning Kaichen was doing this now. Those who didn't know would think that this cupped fist had a special meaning. Take him away and behead him, the Empress said faintly as she looked at him. Throwing flirtatious glances at me? Courageous. Since he is so courageous, then behead him. Upon hearing this, Ning Saichen's face turned green. Your Majesty, please forgive me. I have my difficulties. This time, I'm here to ask for help. Furthermore, I have generous gifts for you. Your Majesty, he's Ning Kaichen, Ren Baqian said softly from the side. He couldn't watch the Empress behead him. The Empress thought for a while and felt that this name sounded familiar. The one who told you about the Lien family. Previously, he came to your birthday celebration as well, Ren Baqian added. The Empress finally remembered, following which, she looked at Ning Kaichen with a strange expression on her face. If she didn't remember wrongly, he was a man, right? For a man to become like this, even she felt awkward. After all, cross-dressing big shots weren't popular in Dayo. It's a long story. Ning Kaichen began to sigh. Make a long story short, Ren Baqian's face was full of spirit. This guy really didn't know what was good for him. Recently, an organization appeared. The core members of this organization are sword masters. Someone issued a mission inside. This organization has nothing to do with him becoming like this. Ren Baqian timely interrupted. Ning Kaichun rolled his eyes at Rinpochian with hidden bitterness. Then he was drugged. The person who drugged you was an enemy, right? Since he could turn you into this, why didn't he kill you? Rinpochian finally asked this question. He said that he's a good person. All living beings are fated to come to this world and have the luck of heaven. Killing people is against the harmony of heaven. As such, he never kills people. I've never heard of him killing people. Rinpochian pondered and felt that it was better to just kill him. I seem to have some impression of him. Zhu Cixin? The Empress asked. There weren't many people who acted so strangely and had such strange methods. Even if the Empress didn't pay much attention to the outside world, she had more or less heard about it. Ning Kaichun said faintly, "That's him. Then why are you here?" Rinpochian asked. "I heard that there's something called the Luoyin root that can cure my current condition. This thing can only be found in the 60,000 mountains. I'm afraid that it will be difficult to find it if I go in alone. Therefore, I want to exchange it for an item." Ning Kaichun finally got down to business. "I have a shiweka that I originally wanted to use to exchange for a few materials in the future. I'm willing to use this item to thank you. This item has no other effects, but it can greatly increase one's chi and blood. It's very beneficial for practitioners and can save at least 10 years of hard work. It can be considered a rare treasure." The Empress became serious when she heard about the shiweka. She had heard of this item before. It was one of the rare treasures that could only be found by luck. Although it wasn't very useful to her, it was very useful to Rinpochian. Rinpochian's cultivation required all kinds of medicinal herbs, so his cultivation speed was much faster than that of ordinary people. Although this item couldn't help Rinpochian save years of hard work, it would definitely get twice the result with half the effort. Previously, Rinpochian consumed Lu Chi's Spirit Yuan pill to replenish his vitality and improve his aptitude. If Rinpochian practiced ordinary martial arts, that Spirit Yuan pill would have a miraculous effect. However, for Rinpochian's Rui visualization, the effect wasn't as great as expected. This shiweka was just enough for Rinpochian. This Luoyin root is also something that can only be found by luck. Although it's said to exist, very few people have seen it, the Empress said. Naturally, she wanted the shiweka, but it wasn't easy to find it. It's best to find it as soon as possible. I feel that I'm becoming more and more sentimental these days. Ning Kaichun looked charming. Although he was a man, his facial expression and tone were even more seductive than a woman's. A few guards were weighing whether to snatch him back and make him their wife. The Empress's eyes drifted to the side. Based on his behavior, why not just kill him? Rinpochian looked embarrassed and said, "You may need this, what?" The Empress turned to look at him. Ning Saichen's eyes were about to emit peach blossoms. Electric shock therapy, using a weak, short, and moderate amount of electric current to stimulate the patient's brain to achieve the goal of controlling the patient's mental symptoms. Rinpochian felt that given his current situation, it was necessary to give him an electric shock. Maybe he would be cured? In any case, it couldn't get any worse, right? "Wait, I'll go look for it," Rinpochian said, and hurriedly ran to the carriage outside. Many of his things were packed in boxes in the carriage. If he remembered correctly, there should be an electric baton there. After the time it took for an incense stick to burn, Rinpochian ran back excitedly with a short and thick baton. This treasure hadn't seen the light of day for a long time. "Sir Run, what are you doing?" Ning Kaichun exclaimed, then said flirtatiously, It's so thick I zap." Rinpochian directly placed the electric baton on Ning Saichen's arm. Chapter 420. Slave, 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 slave. Rinpochian poked Ning Saichen's body with the electric baton for a few seconds before withdrawing it. Ning Kaichun was already lying on the ground. He had experience being shocked by an electric baton before and naturally knew how it would react. It would probably take a while for him to recover. "Your Majesty, what is shiweka?" Rinpochian asked after she sat down and attentively moved a chair over for the Empress. When Ning Kaichun mentioned shiweka, the Empress was obviously moved. "I'm not sure either. I've only seen it in a book. This thing is very useful to you. After consuming it, You will be able to achieve twice the results with half the effort, the Empress said faintly. Rinpoche's heart warmed. After all, the Empress wanted it because it was useful to him. Thank you, Your Majesty. The Empress rolled her eyes. Even though it was just an ordinary eye roll, in Rinpoche's eyes, it was amorous and made his heart palpitate. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. An ordinary woman could become beautiful and attractive in the eyes of her lover, let alone the Empress. Is that useful? The Empress felt that the electric shock therapy mentioned by Rinpoche wasn't very reliable. She also discovered Ning Saichen's current condition. It was obvious that there was a problem with his spirit. Fortunately, he was a sword master and all his strength was in the sword. If a spirit will expert became like him, he would be half crippled. However, a spirit wheel expert wouldn't be reduced to such a state. Zhu Cixing had been a spirit wheel expert for decades, but his strength hadn't improved at all. It seemed that his inability to improve had something to do with this method. This method hurt both others and oneself. Even though it didn't kill anyone, it cut off the path of others and himself. Maybe it might be useful. Rinpoche was a little uncertain. He heard that psychiatric hospitals often used this method. Professor Yang, the lightning Dharma king, relied on this method to make a name for himself. Ning Kaichen obviously had a mental problem. There were no psychiatrists in this world, and Rinpoche was treating him like a dead horse. What if luck worked? Maybe? The Empress tilted her head and looked at him, then at Ning Kaichen on the ground. Finally, she looked up at the sky and squinted. Today was a rare sunny day. Ning Saichen's life or death had nothing to do with her, and she didn't care either. She just wanted to know if he really had a solution. Rinpoche squatted in front of Ning Kaichen to check on his condition. Just now, Rinpoche had been in trance for 3 to 4 seconds. Seeing that his eyes were focused, he asked, "Are you feeling better?" After a long time, Ning Kaichen finally regained consciousness. However, his entire body was sore and numb, and he was almost unable to move. What a powerful rod! My body is turned soft. Ning Kaichen had just regained his senses when he saw Rinpoche with a face full of flirtatious expressions. He looked at Rinpoche with a heart-shaped gaze. Sizzle. When Ning Kaichen said the last few words, Rinpoche expressionlessly struck him with the stun baton again. Everyone in the surroundings looked at Ning Kaichen with a look of astonishment on their faces. After trembling for a while, Ning Kaichen lay down on the ground. "My lord, you're so awesome. Your servant, sizzle. I like Juan so much, sizzle. Sizzle." Rinpoche quivered and jabbed the stun baton again. After an afternoon, Rinpoche looked excited and started to gain some confidence. "It seems to be effective?" The Empress nodded in agreement. "It's working, but it's getting worse." In the original version, the character was alternating between a man and a woman. This time, it was always a woman. Rinpoche pondered for a while. In the past, he was suffering from schizophrenia, alternating between a man and a woman. Now, he had simply transformed into a woman. From a certain point of view, it did have a certain effect on schizophrenia. Forget it. Let's stop the treatment for now and see how he'll be after he wakes up. At the very least, he needed some time to observe the effects of the treatment to see if it would still change between male and female. If he was no longer a man and a woman, then he would at least be half cured and his schizophrenia would be cured. As for the other half, there was nothing he could do. After a long time, Ning Saichen's gaze regained its focus. "How do you feel?" After Rinpoche finished speaking, he almost poked the electric baton again. He was already used to it. "I've never felt so good," Ning Kaichen said in a gentle tone. The ancient saying is right. Being a woman is actually quite good. The ancients, Rinpoche, the Empress, many guards, everyone looked at the electric baton in Rinpoche's hands as if they had seen a ghost. This time he was finished. Initially, there was only a small problem, but after Principal Ren's treatment, he completely transformed into a woman. Speaking of which, I still have to thank Sir Ren. If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't know what I want. Ning Kai-chun continued. Rinpoche's face was full of vigor. His treatment was considered a success, right? It should be a success, right? The most important thing for a person is to know what they want and work hard to achieve it. Otherwise, wouldn't their life be a waste? Rinpoche encouraged him. Ning Kai-chun replied, Sir is right. The Empress and many guards looked at Rinpoche with a strange look in their eyes. Ning Kai-chun's transformation was already awkward enough, but Rinpoche was actually able to talk to him? Rinpoche was a little nervous. After all, Ning Kai-chun was considered an acquaintance. Now that he had become like this, he should be fine, right? Rinpoche looked around and saw that everyone was looking at him with a strange look in their eyes. He coughed twice and said, Your Majesty, it's getting late. Let's have our meal first. I will come back to check on him after dinner. After dinner, Rinpoche strolled back to the courtyard. Ning Kai-chun had already gotten up from the ground and was sitting on a stool at the side. His head was slightly lowered as he combed his hair with his hand. How do you feel? Rinpoche asked from a few meters away. I feel very good. I will never forget Sir Ren's great kindness. Why don't I repay you with my body? Stop. Rinpoche was shocked and quickly shouted. If you want to repay me with your body, you'd better be dragged away and beheaded. I'm just joking. Sir Ren is so excited that I'm a little hesitant. Rinpoche had goosebumps all over his body. He felt that he had really gone overboard this time. It was really comfortable just now. I will never forget that feeling. I only hope that Sir Ren will use that thing to ravage me again. Ning Kai-chun raised his head and his eyes were glistening. If it was someone who didn't know him, based on his tone and demeanor, he would really think that he was a beauty. F***CK. Rinpoche couldn't help but curse. He had really gone overboard this time. Ning Kai-chun had actually become like this. Chapter 421. When Rinpoche, the Empress, and the rest moved forward, Ning Kai-chun had already left. He said that he was going back to retrieve the Shueka and wanted to exchange the stun baton with Rinpoche. Ning Kai-chun might have fallen in love with the stun baton or the feeling of being electrocuted. Looking at Ning Kai-chun drifting away with a flirtatious look on his face, Rinpoche thought that this might be a good thing. He had found his own value in his beloved stun baton. In the future, he would be able to roam the world alone with a stun baton. How carefree would that be? How many people in the world knew what they wanted until they died? They lived one day at a time. Furthermore, an ancient person once said that great souls were hermaphrodites. That should be correct, right? This showed that Ning Kai-chun now had a great soul. Witnessing such a thing with his own eyes made people tear up. Furthermore, his schizophrenia was cured. Every medicine had its side effects, and it was normal for the treatment to have some side effects. It was just that the gender perception was a little different. As long as the person didn't object, it would be fine. Looking at Ning Kai-chun, wasn't he quite happy? No objection? Pretty good. Rinpoche was relieved, but the rest couldn't. They looked at Rinpoche as if they had seen a ghost. Seeing such a half-man, half-woman completely turn into a woman, this kind of ability was too terrifying for the burly aboriginal men. What if he turned them into a half-man, half-woman? They subconsciously wanted to stay away from Rinpoche. They didn't know how Rinpoche turned Ning Kai-chun into this. They only saw him poking him with a blue stick from time to time, and he became like this after one afternoon. It was really terrifying. Yagüe, I heard that you turned a man into a woman. Tonglan ran over to ask Rinpoche after hearing about this. There were many students looking from afar and seemed to be very concerned about this answer. Do you want to try too? Rinpoche had a malicious look on his face. The little Lolita looked at him with disdain and hesitated for a long time before saying, Can you turn me into a man? Why? Rinpoche was surprised. He had never heard of the Tong family valuing men over women. Why would Tonglan have such an idea? The Aboriginals' women weren't weak and weren't weaker than men. Therefore, there was no such thing as valuing men over women. Just look at the fact that there are even women among the big shots in the imperial court. However, because women were naturally meticulous and patient, there were more of them in the Ministry of Revenue and less of them in other departments. I heard that House Yunyan is quite fun. I wanted to go there for a long time, but Grandpa wouldn't let me. He said that only men can enter. No matter how intelligent she was still a 10-year-old child. Sometimes she still had childish thoughts. Renbachin, this was definitely a lack of family education, a lack of parental care, and a decline in social morality. This method of mine is a little flawed. There's a high chance that I'll become a half-man and half-woman, but I won't be able to enter the half-man and half-woman either, Renbachin said in distress. Bah, so useless. Tong Lan had a look of disappointment on her face. She didn't want a half-man, half-woman. This fellow was indeed unreliable. While everyone was still on the road, two things happened. The first was that the winged cavalry and Li Qianqiu's troops successfully returned with the help of Hongwu. Just as expected, the interior of Great Xia was empty at this time. The military power had been drawn out, and other than some experts from the martial world, there wasn't much resistance. However, those experts from a martial world and a portion of the garrison were like sand castles in front of the winged cavalry. With a gentle push, they turned into a pile of sand. A total of 5 cities were wiped out, and the entire Great Xia was shaken. However, there was one thing that wasn't as expected. When they went, they planned to let them rob enough gold and silver to return. In the end, when they returned, more than half of what they had was food, and more food. Most of it was consumed on the way back. Fortunately, they brought back a batch of gold, silver, and jewels. Furthermore, they had robbed them from wealthy families and should be worth a lot. They could replenish the national treasury and at least support the construction of the highway. This army had left behind an illustrious reputation in Great Xia. Wherever they went, they would eat everything up, eat everything up, eat everything up. This was something that they didn't expect. Within Dayo, there wasn't much meat that could satisfy their needs. Most of the time, they had to eat vegetarian food for 6 meals a day. After all, there was a large amount of vegetarian food, it was difficult to transport, and it wasn't able to fight hunger. As a result, every city collected livestock and used these grains to fill their stomachs. As a result, starvation broke out wherever this army passed. Not only did this army run amok in Great Xia, but also caused panic in many nearby cities. This caused a huge uproar in Great Xia, and Great Xia was badly battered in order to provide relief to the commoners in these 5 cities. After the departure of the Dayo army, hundreds of thousands of commoners from the 5 cities and the surrounding villages rushed into the surrounding cities, causing some chaos in the surrounding cities. The reason for the chaos was because of food. After all, most of the rations used by Great Xia to support the 700,000 soldiers were transferred from the nearby cities in the south. Many of the city's granaries used for disaster relief were already empty. When such a thing happened, they were unable to take out any rations that could be used for disaster relief. They could only rely on the officials to contact some wealthy families to provide porridge. There was also the notice that Renbachin asked Li Qianqiu to put up. Although it seemed like a joke to many scholars, Dayo still dared to ask for compensation. Furthermore, it was directly said when they came to rob. It was as if someone fought with you, beat you up, and demanded that you pay him 100 taels of silver. If you didn't pay, you would be robbed from your house. What was the difference between this and bandits? However, resentment arose in the hearts of many commoners. After all, they had lived a peaceful life, but in the end, they encountered a disaster and had to leave their hometown temporarily. This kind of bone-piercing pain caused resentment to rise in their hearts. To Dayo and to Great Xia, the return of Li Qianqiu and the winged cavalry was one thing. The other thing was that the entire family of the warlord of Qingfeng City had been exterminated. The Department of Inspection had snatched some precious treasures from his residence and had already returned to Dayo. They were currently rushing to the Protectorate of the South to hand over the treasures to the Empress. Both of these things were good news. Although the value of the treasures hadn't been calculated, it wouldn't be too low. It would be enough to start some construction work after returning. At this moment, Renbachin was standing in the Empress's imperial carriage. He lifted the curtains and could already see the army that was lined up and waiting in formation. There were thousands of fierce-looking, bald, burly men who were bare-chested and only had a piece of animal skin wrapped diagonally from his left shoulder to his right waist. They looked more like bandits than an army. However, Dayo's army was like this, and they were used to it. This time, they finally arrived at their destination. Chapter 422. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. It was probably because he hadn't had a cold or a fever in a long time that he had forgotten what it felt like. These few days, he had thought that he had a mild fever and didn't even take fever medicine. He just took some cold medicine every day. After a few days, he couldn't take it anymore yesterday. In the middle of the night, he started taking Pisces pain tablets. This could stop the pain and reduce the fever. Today, when he went to the doctor to take his temperature, he found out that it was over 38 degrees Celsius, and that was after taking the medicine. In other words, his temperature had been over 39 degrees Celsius for the past few days. He had to send his son to the hospital every day in temperatures that were over minus 20 degrees Celsius. He had to queue up for injections and aerosol treatment twice a day for 4 to 5 hours. He didn't notice his own condition at all. He had always thought that it was a low fever within 38 degrees Celsius. No wonder he felt so bad. His physique was too good. He hadn't had a cold or a fever in a long time. He had forgotten what it felt like and didn't take it seriously. If he had known earlier, he would have been fine after taking the fever medicine. Thinking about his condition these few days, he couldn't bear to look back. Also, the flu this time was really bad. Even with my physique, I got infected. Chapter 423. Rinpoche hadn't seen many different kinds of people and things in this world. All he had seen and come into contact with were basically aboriginals. Then, there were the foreign merchants in Lan City and the people who came to celebrate the Empress's birthday at the Honlu Bureau. No matter how poor Lan City was, it was still under the rule of the emperor. In particular, the merchants at Jingdao were all from big and influential families. They more or less put on airs and didn't have much of a market atmosphere. After arriving at Valley City and walking out of the mansion that had been arranged for them, they saw many shops and stalls of all shapes and sizes. Moreover, most of them were foreign merchants and remnant citizens of the Han Nation. There weren't many aboriginals here. Beside Rinpoche was a young aboriginal called Fong Ting. Like the other aboriginals, he was bald, had a fierce-looking face, had a body full of strong muscles, and was twice the width of an ordinary person. This was the guide that Shi Wangu had arranged for him. After all, Rinpoche and his bodyguard were unfamiliar with this place. Most of the people live in the mountains. They set off in the morning and will only arrive here at noon. There aren't many people now, but there will be more in the afternoon, Fong Ting explained to Rinpoche. Rinpoche knew that the people he was referring to were the aboriginals. As for the people from other countries and remnant citizens of the Han Nation, they weren't included here. Just like how the people from other countries rejected the aboriginals also rejected them. Set off in the morning and arrive at noon? It's not too far away, Rinpoche said as he looked at the few aboriginals around him. There's a big city called Nanhuang to the south of the Great Basin. It's more lively there and has a lot of good stuff, Fong Ting said. The goods sold here were mainly oil, salt, soy sauce, vinegar, and cloth for the remnant citizens of the Han Nation. Other than that, they also bought herbs and animal hides. They were mainly targeted at commoners and didn't have a lot of good stuff. In Nanhuang, it was mainly targeted at the aboriginals in the 60,000 mountains. Every day, many villagers brought the things they found in the mountains to Nanhuang City to sell and exchange. It was extremely lively and had a lot of good stuff. It was even livelier than Lan City. After all, there were limited ways to store things in this world, and many things couldn't be stored for a long time. The journey to Lan City was also very long, and it would take at least 20 days. If it was a convoy, the speed would be even slower, and it would take more than a month. Some gems and minerals were still fine, but some rare fruits would have already rotted by the time they reached Lan City. There were also some strange beasts that were on the verge of death after leaving the environment of the 60,000 mountains. When they reached Lan City, not many of them could survive. Back when he participated in the Great Hunt, he saw some strange mounts. Basically, they were mutants that had been captured from the 60,000 mountains and sent to Lawn City, and they survived. The Empress didn't care about these things, but the second and third generations of the Aboriginal officials were very fond of them. Riding on them would also make them look good. However, there weren't many of them. Along the way, Rinpoche occasionally chatted with Fong Ting. Most of his attention was on the shops and pedestrians on both sides of the road. After walking for some time, Rinpoche gradually recognized the differences between the remnant citizens of the Han Nation and the merchants from other nations. The people of Great Xia were usually more arrogant. After all, they were backed by the most powerful nation. These few days, when Great Xia attacked, the merchants were all captured. However, they couldn't go back either. These few days, the war between the two nations had temporarily ended, and these merchants were able to travel freely again. After all, they had just lost a battle. However, they were also different from the merchants of the Yun Nation and the Qin Nation. The merchants of the Yun Nation were very extravagant. Whether it was their attire or the utensils they used, they were all more exquisite. Each and every one of them welcomed people with a smiling face and scolded behind their backs. What the Aboriginals hated the most was this kind of thick-skinned behavior. The merchants of the Qin Nation were characterized by their dark skin. They were dark, skinny, small, and ugly. Even after moving from the Yun Nation to the Qin Nation, perhaps it was due to the fact that people were born in different places, but they still exuded a sense of pettiness. Simply put, the temperament of the people of these three nations was very different. As for the remnant citizens of the Han Nation, they should actually be called the Shanyang people. It was said that they first migrated from a place called Shanyang. Later, as they multiplied and the commoners of Great Xia, who couldn't survive, continued to migrate over, they merged together and developed. There wasn't much difference in appearance from the people of Great Xia and the Yun Nation, except that their foreheads were more prominent and their eye sockets were slightly deeper. There were also many differences in their clothing. These remnant citizens of the Han Nation wore a small blouse on the upper body and a pleated skirt on the lower part of the waist. There were slits on both sides, and one could inadvertently see their hairy legs through the slits. Both men and women were dressed like this. The most important thing was the hatred hidden in their eyes. Although they didn't show it on the surface and buried it in their hearts, it couldn't be hidden. Their nation was destroyed, ruled, and tens of millions of people were kept in captivity in a basin. It had been 71 years, and this hatred had almost penetrated deep into their bones. In particular, when they saw Rinpoche, they were astonished and amazed. After that, the hatred in their eyes seemed to be even stronger than when they looked at the Aboriginals, which made Rinpoche feel very puzzled. He had never dealt with them before. In fact, it wasn't difficult to guess their thoughts. They were kept in captivity, but Rinpoche had infiltrated the Aboriginal court with Aboriginal guards. They were both outsiders, but they were treated differently. Furthermore, Rinpoche was the husband of the Empress and had contributed to the war with Great Xia. Although they didn't know the specifics, they more or less heard some rumors in this place where merchants from various nations gathered. Even in their dreams, they wanted Great Xia to drive those barbarians back into the mountains. Even if Great Xia became the master of this land in the future, they would still be able to live freely. However, Great Xia lost miserably. It took 71 years for Great Xia to send out their troops, but they were defeated miserably. How could Rinpoche, who played a major role in this, not be hated? If he were an Aboriginal, they would have added this kind of hatred to all the Aboriginals. However, he wasn't. He was also an outsider to the Aboriginals. "Come here." Rinpoche waved at a man not far away. That man lowered his head and hurried away as if he didn't hear him. "Capture him," Rinpoche said faintly. Even a blind man could see the hatred in that man's eyes when he saw him. He touched his waist, hesitated for a moment, and then let go. A guard went over, grabbed the back of that man's neck, and dragged him over. "What are you doing?" That man struggled and shouted. "Search your waist and see what's on it," Rinpoche said softly as he supported his chin with his finger. Following which, a knife made of bone was handed to Rinpoche. "Want to kill me?" Rinpoche held the bone knife with 2 fingers and looked at it calmly. This bone knife was rather sharp and was about 1.5 feet long. These people from How Nations stuffed the bone knife into their skirts and placed it close to their legs, so it wasn't easy to see. "No, sir, you have misunderstood." That man lowered his head and asked. He was surrounded by Aboriginal guards, and even if there were another 100 of him, he wouldn't be able to hurt Rinpoche. He wasn't a fool and naturally knew what to say. "Why?" Rinpoche asked doubtfully. "I have never seen you before, so I don't think we have any enmity." "Sir, you have misunderstood." "I wouldn't dare. Whether it's a misunderstanding or not, it's not up to you to say. I feel that if you want to kill me, you will be courting death." Rinpoche ignored his words and said. He felt that he wasn't mistaken. The other party's eyes were filled with hatred, and his hand was placed on his waist where the knife was hidden. Looking at Rinpoche with hatred in his eyes and such an obvious action, Rinpoche was treating him as a fool if he said that he didn't have any intentions. "Actually, I quite like to see people hate me to death, but can't do anything to me. However, I want to know why they hate me so much that they can't help but touch their knife even in front of so many guards," Rinpoche said softly. "There's a reason for every action. Don't tell me that you are afraid of seeing so many people and want to touch your knife for a sense of security." That person immediately said, "Sir, I just thought of something and wanted to touch my knife to see if I brought it out. In the end, I realized that I didn't bring it and wanted to go back to get it." "Well, that makes sense." Rinpoche nodded. That person heaved a sigh of relief. "However, I don't believe you. Bring me back and interrogate me for a few days before I consider whether I believe you or not." Rinpoche waved his hand at the guard. That person's expression changed drastically. If he was tortured for a few days, would he still be alive? "What's the point of considering whether you believe me or not at that time?" Many people in the surroundings also looked in this direction. After hearing this, they lowered their heads and hurriedly left, not daring to look again. These days, Shiwanya had been killing, and many people were trembling with fear. They only dared to bury their hatred in their hearts. Looking at this situation, everyone knew that this person wouldn't be able to live. In fact, Rinpoche had more or less guessed it. Perhaps not everything, but he could guess a little. He walked around the streets for a long time, and the gazes he saw made him feel that it wouldn't be easy to get any information from them. It was better to do something simple and direct. "This time, I'm here to do a good deed and to save the lives of all of you. With your petty tricks, sooner or later, the Empress won't be able to endure it. Now, you can be excluded. Sacrificing one of you, or a few more, will bring happiness to millions of families. I will erect a monument for all of you later. Don't say that everything was a human life. He wasn't a saint, nor was he a monk. He didn't pay attention to the equality of all living beings. Killing 1, 10, 100, 1,000, or even 10,000 innocent people would allow 100,000, 1 million, or even 10 million people to obediently submit to Dao's rule and contribute to the modernization of Dao. That would be his goal. To put it bluntly, Rinpoche also knew that it was impossible for him to not kill people. Chapter 424. The so-called torture of the Aboriginals wasn't torture, but torture. These guys couldn't play such tricks. In the 60,000 mountains, they were fighting against the heavens and the earth for their lives. They didn't have the mood to do such things. In their opinion, killing people was just a matter of nodding to the ground. If they didn't like it, they could just kill them. They didn't have so many tricks up their sleeves to torture people. Even if they left the mountains and established a nation, it would only last for a few decades. They would be extremely poor, and there were other countries eyeing them covetously. They didn't have the time to think about such things. The scaly whip was dipped in salt water, and with a shake, the scales exploded. It tore off a piece of flesh from the back. Even the Aboriginals would have to lie in bed for a few days after being whipped 3 times, let alone ordinary people. 3 lashes would leave them half dead. The people who were captured weren't tough, but it didn't matter even if they were. Rinpoche could capture them again with call. In Rinpoche's heart, These Hao Nation immigrants had nothing to do with him. After the war, they were just numbers in his heart. He had seen many dead people, and it didn't matter if a few more innocent people died. Where there were people, there would be conflicts. If there were more than one person, there would be differences in status. If there were more than two people, there would be gangs. This was the case even among the Hao Nation immigrants who were kept in captivity. Not only were there differences in status, but there were also conflicts in sections. This was what Renbachian learned in the past few days in Goose City. There were 67 big and small cities and hundreds of sects in Tianjin Basin. Back then, the rebels took the Hao Nation immigrants into the basin and divided them into various powers. There were also many conflicts between them. The most ordinary people were naturally the ordinary people. Above them were the army and the sections. The army belonged to the big powers, and the sects belonged to the small powers. There were conflicts between the sects, and there would be disciples who entered the army to wield power. There were three main forces in Tianjin Basin, and each of them governed dozens of cities. Moreover, these three forces were not as united as a piece of iron. The leaders of the rebel army, big and small, had become city lords and city officials in the blink of an eye. There weren't many soldiers, only about 200,000. After all, the protector to the south was watching, and they wouldn't sit back and watch them grow. Moreover, they had also changed their names. They used the name of the city defense army, and there were only a few thousand to 10,000 of them scattered across each city. After all, they still belonged to Dayo. The imperial court could still tolerate a few thousand soldiers guarding a city. However, if they established their own army, then they wouldn't be able to tolerate it. That would be the path to their deaths. Back then, those rebels had been beaten to the brink of death. Now, they only dared to play some tricks under the table. Naturally, they didn't dare to stir up trouble in public. If they stepped out of line, even the agreement from back then wouldn't be able to protect them. As for the sects, although there were more than 100 of them, their overall strength was not strong. Some of the stronger ones escaped from Dayo and went to other nations. The rest were either weak or couldn't bear to leave their homeland. Although there were still some experts left, they couldn't raise any waves. Moreover, Shiwanya was still keeping an eye on him. From time to time, if he discovered any signs of trouble, he would pull out a group of people to be sacrificed. A few days ago, when they fought with Great Xia, they killed tens of thousands of people. Renbachian stayed in Goose City for a few days. Other than the information he obtained from the few remnant citizens of the Hao Nation, he also obtained information from Shiwanya. Although he hadn't entered the basin and didn't see it with his own eyes, he had a rough idea of the situation there. He just had to go in and see it with his own eyes to verify the information he had obtained. Renbachian closed a booklet that contained some of the things he had sorted out over the past few days. After leaving the room, he turned into a few courtyards and heard the sound of stringed instruments coming from another courtyard. Upon entering the courtyard, he saw a man and a woman playing a bamboo musical instrument. It was somewhat like a flute, but it was only the length of a palm. The sound wasn't as desolate and resentful as the flute, but it still had a unique flavor. The Empress was eating fruits in her room. Beside her was the candy tree. Wherever the Empress went, the tree would be planted. Renbachian was even prepared to install a frame under the tree and install 4 wheels. "How is it?" the Empress asked when she saw him striding in. "I have to go and take a look to find out," Renbachian replied softly. He sat beside the Empress, took a fruit from the plate, and took a bite. It melted in his mouth and tasted sweet and delicious. These were all good things that Shiwanya had sent to the Empress. "When are you leaving?" The Empress's eyes lit up. She was also bored of staying here. She wasn't interested in the things that Renbachian did. She came out this time to see what those fellows who were protected by Dayo were like. On the other hand, she wasn't willing to be separated from Renbachian for a few months. "I'm afraid that I will have to split up with your Majesty," Renbachian said. If he were to travel with the Empress, he would be a big target and was afraid that he wouldn't be able to see anything. The Empress was a little disappointed, but she knew that this was a serious matter. "Your Majesty, do you want to go back with me?" "I will set off after I return," Renbachian asked. Previously, he had said that he wanted to see Chi Jiyu, But these days, he had been on the road, and the Empress hadn't followed him back to Earth. He actually wanted to settle this matter quickly. In the end, he also had an idea of what to do. He would kill those who needed to be killed so that he wouldn't have to worry about her. Then let's go and take a look. The Empress nodded and instructed Qing Yuan and Hong Wan. With one hand holding Run Baqian's wrist, the two disappeared from the room. After a while, Qing Yuan and Hong Wan went out to let the two people who were playing outside leave. After returning to Earth, the two of them changed their clothes. At this time, it was the end of midsummer and the weather was very hot. Ren Baqian actually wanted to ask the Empress if she wanted to go for a swim. He couldn't forget about this matter. Thinking about the Empress in a swimsuit, it really made him excited. However, there was still a serious matter at this time. Your Majesty, do you still remember the person that I mentioned previously who looks like you? Ren Baqian asked. I'm somewhat interested, but since you want me to see him so much, I'm afraid that there's something going on. The Empress smiled and looked at him. Every time she returned here, she could always relax a lot. Here, she wasn't the Empress of Dayo. There is indeed. Ren Baqian nodded. However, I need your Majesty to take a look first. All right. Seeing that he was serious, the Empress nodded. Although he was usually not a serious person, since he said that there was something going on, then she really had to go and take a look. Your Majesty, a new phone. Ren Baqian wasn't in a hurry to leave. First, he took out something from the hands behind his back. It was a red phone. Is it a little different from the previous one? The Empress looked at this phone. It was slightly narrower. When she held it in her hand, it was actually soft. It's indeed different. Ren Baqian held the Empress's hand and wrapped the phone around her wrist. It was as if she had an additional watch. It's all like this now. Ren Baqian smiled and said, with the emergence of the flexible screen, this type of phone had become a new technology. In fact, it had already appeared 2 years ago, but it was only now that it was on the market. It's indeed convenient. The Empress nodded. Let's go. Ren Baqian pulled the Empress to the car and drove away. After a while, they arrived at the entrance of SH University. When they were at the villa, he checked the date and compared it to Qi Jiayu's class schedule. She should be in class today. The two of them walked into the campus. This kind of ivory tower was different from society. It was much simpler. Students coming and going were holding books, and it was filled with an academic atmosphere. Is this Zixiao's first time coming to a university? Ren Baqian held the Empress's hand and walked on campus like a couple. It's indeed my first time. The Empress nodded her head. Previously, Ren Baqian had brought her to elementary schools. She had seen how those 10-year-old children were studying in school. Now that she looked at the university again, it was indeed somewhat different. This made her extremely envious. Fortunately, Dayo had its own school now. Even though there weren't many students, there were seeds that would sprout sooner or later. The two of them walked on campus. The Empress's appearance and temperament were eye-catching no matter where she went, let alone these ivory tower students who were fantasizing about love. The Empress's eyes almost popped out when she saw the Empress. She thought to herself, there's actually such a girl in school? Why haven't I heard of her before? However, looking at the hand that Ren Baqian was holding, she couldn't help but curse in her heart. All the good cabbages have been taken by pigs. Chapter 425. As the bell rang, there was a commotion in the school building. Students started to run out of the building. As more and more people came out, Ren Baqian's gaze searched the crowd. The place where both of them were standing wasn't considered too remote. The field of vision was good, and everyone could see them, especially when they saw the Empress. Many of them were surprised and felt that she looked inexplicably familiar. After all, some of these students were Qi Jiayu's classmates. They are out, Ren Baqian said faintly when he saw a face in the crowd. Although the face was almost the same, when Ren Baqian saw the lady in the crowd, his gaze was very cold. The Empress followed his gaze and saw the lady who looked similar to her. A strong, killing intent emanated from the bottom of her heart. She raised her eyebrows. Her hair fluttered without any wind, and the surroundings became colder. It's a very strange feeling, the Empress said coldly. At this moment, she knew why Ren Baqian asked her to take a look. Rinpoche could feel the murderous aura from her body. He wasn't surprised at all. I felt the same when I saw the seventh prince. Is there a connection? The Empress could hear the hidden meaning in his words. Perhaps there's a connection that we don't know about. Rinpoche didn't know what the connection was, but he knew that this kind of killing intent wasn't without reason. While the two of them were talking, Chi Jiayu also felt something and looked in their direction. When she saw the Empress's face, she was stunned. Then, she couldn't hide the shock on her face and stopped in her tracks. When her classmates saw her reaction and noticed this, they were all surprised. "Don't kill here," Rinpoche said softly when he felt the Empress's killing intent getting stronger. Those days when he just came back from the battlefield, his killing intent was too strong, and he was somewhat demonic. These days of peaceful life had reduced his killing intent by a lot. This time, he could control himself and remember the promise he made. Chi Jiayu walked towards the two of them, looked at Rinpoche and asked doubtfully, "This is?" She always knew that she was very beautiful. It wouldn't be surprising if she met someone prettier than her. However, she didn't expect to meet a lady who looked so similar to her and had a better temperament than her. Compared to her, although their looks were very similar, she was a Cinderella, and the other party was like a princess. She had an urge to become like him. The aura of the other party and the feeling of being superior made her feel an indescribable sense of envy and jealousy. Rinpoche carefully looked into her eyes and indeed saw the hostility in them. However, she was just an ordinary girl and wouldn't have the same immediate killing intent as him and the Empress. Indeed, it's very similar. This world is really wonderful. Rinpoche smiled, but no one could tell that he was indifferent just now. "Did you come all the way here just to find me?" Chi Jiayu hid her thoughts and asked with a smile. "You could say so." She heard that someone looked like her, so she came to take a look out of curiosity, Rinpoche said with a smile. "Now that I've seen it, it's time to go." "Oh." Chi Jiayu didn't know how to reply. The Empress's appearance made her feel very uneasy. She had forced herself to squeeze out that smile just now. "Let's go." Rinpoche held the Empress's hand. Before he turned around and left, he nodded at Chi Jiayu and said goodbye. He was afraid that if the Empress stayed any longer, there would be a murder in this university. Chi Jiayu stared blankly at the two of them, holding hands and leaving. She even forgot to ask about what Rinpoche told her previously. He said that she would meet those people, but she hadn't met them even after a few months. She originally wanted to ask, but now she had forgotten about it. "How is it?" Rinpoche leaned back on the seat and turned to look at the Empress. "It's very strange. I want to kill her." The Empress looked a little doubtful. She was different from Rinpoche. She was the fifth most powerful expert in the world, and she had always controlled her state of mind very well. It was very strange that a stranger could make her feel like killing. She wanted to find out the reason more than Rinpoche. "You said that you felt the same way when you saw the seventh prince of Great Xia?" The Empress asked. "Yes, the seventh prince must have felt the same way," Rinpoche said faintly. "When I saw her that day, I felt like killing her. At that time, I didn't know why. Later on, I found out that you have a trace of soul in my body and knew that she has the same connection with you. Do you have any thoughts?" The Empress asked. "A little." Rinpoche nodded his head and told her what he thought at that time. There was a movie in the past that had an interesting concept. There were countless versions of himself in countless parallel worlds. Every time he killed one of them, he would become stronger. After the seventh prince died, did anything change in your body? The Empress asked. "I entered Rui visualization a few days after the seventh prince died. I don't know if there is any connection between the two." Rinpoche wasn't very clear about this matter, but he was afraid that there might be some changes in his thinking. This was because he entered Rui visualization on those 2 days. It was too coincidental. The Empress was silent for a long time before saying, "Keep her alive. Don't let her die. She might be useful when I want to break through to the cardinal heaven level. I have this feeling." The Empress was already at the peak of the cardinal heaven level. If she broke through again, she would reach longevity heaven, which was the strength of the first emperor. After the first emperor reached everlasting heaven, he left with his ministers and powerful army, never to be seen again. Rinpoche was slightly worried after hearing what the empress said. How long do you need to break through? 3 to 5 years if it's fast, decades if it's slow. The empress wasn't sure either. She was still one step away from reaching that barrier. She wasn't sure how long this step would take. Decades is more than 100 years on Earth. I can't protect her for that long. Even her bones won't be left. Rinpoche laughed. He then asked, if you reach longevity heaven, will you leave Dayo? Like the first emperor? The empress was silent. After a while, she said, I don't know what happened. Maybe I will only know when I'm there. If you want to leave, remember to bring me along. Rinpoche held her hand. It was delicate, soft, and his tone was sincere. The first emperor didn't come back, and I don't know if he's dead or alive. None of the people who went back then came back. I'm afraid there's a great danger inside. I've said it before. Even if I'm in hell, I'll look up at the sky to see you. Rinpoche put his face next to the empress's cheek. The empress thought that he wanted to kiss her and was moved by his words. She didn't expect him to just gently rub against her cheek. Both of their cheeks touched and felt each other's warmth. The empress's fragrance also reached Rinpoche's nose. Both of their hearts were filled with tenderness. Your Majesty, you have to wait for me. If you break through, I'm afraid we won't know when we can get married and have children. Rinpoche retracted his head and said with a smile. The empress was a little embarrassed and slapped his hand. Pow! Rinpoche touched the back of his hand, which was red and swollen. He got used to it. However, he really had to hurry up. If the empress really broke through, then he really didn't know when they could get married. He didn't know how long it would take for Ning Tsaichin Shueka to arrive. Not only did he have to reach the earth wheel level, but he also had to reach the spirit wheel level. Otherwise, how could he keep up with the empress's footsteps? He hoped that the empress would slow down a little. He hadn't built Dayo into what she wanted it to be. However, if she was too slow, he was afraid that Shi Jiayu wouldn't live that long. He had to put in more effort. Chapter 426. Both of you came at the right time. I'm going out for a while. Why don't you come take a look together? Yang Sun stood up when he saw Rinpoche. Does it have anything to do with us? Rinpoche asked. A little. Let's talk on the way, Yang Sun said. Yang Sun spoke after the 3 cars had driven out of the underground parking lot of the Messier 87 building. Speaking of which, this matter doesn't have much to do with the 2 of you. Instead, it has something to do with the cultivation method that the 2 of you brought. Following Yang Sun's narration, Rinpoche found out about something interesting. A man-wheel expert had appeared on Earth, a true man-wheel expert. Furthermore, he was an outsider and had to train hard to reach this level. One had to know that Earth did not have systematic cultivation techniques like the other world. Although there were also people who cultivated Taoism, Buddhism, or martial arts, they walked a completely different path. Due to the limitations of the environment, it was difficult for him to achieve too much. After Rinpoche took out the martial arts manual, a group of such experts broke through to the man-wheel level in a short period of time. However, this person had read extensively, summed up the experiences of the predecessors, and after many years of hard work, he created a set of martial arts that could allow him to attain the man-wheel level. This was something that not many people could achieve. From this point alone, this person could be considered to be extremely outstanding. The problem was not this, but something else. This person had been training hard for many years and broke through the limit in one fell swoop to reach the man-will level. He was full of mettle and thought that he was the #1 expert in the world. He thought to himself that since ancient times, no one could surpass him. Based on the foundation of his predecessors, he had taken a huge step forward in his cultivation method and reached a new realm. He had trained hard for decades and was invincible in the world. He couldn't possibly continue to hole up in the mountains, right? If one does not return to one's hometown after becoming rich, it is like walking at night in brocade clothes. This person had been holding back for decades, so he naturally wouldn't act like this now. Instead, he was preparing to become famous overnight. He sent out hero invitations to the so-called Willeen people and set up a challenge to meet all the heroes of the world. If it was just based on the advancement of his cultivation method, it was admirable. Unfortunately, he was a little too arrogant. Hundreds of experts who had attained the man-wheel level through the techniques provided by Rinpoche were ready to surround and kick him. A certain person had trained hard in the deep mountains for dozens of years, and when he came out, he thought that he was number one in the world. In the end, the outside world had changed, and even a child had such strength. That was roughly what it meant. It was very graphic, but also very unlucky. If Rinpoche hadn't provided him with the martial arts, he would have become famous overnight, and everyone in the world would have recognized him. Even in history, his name would be recorded. Unfortunately, Rinpoche didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This person was indeed somewhat tragic. However, Yongsun didn't let Rinpoche and the Empress follow him just to see him. Instead, he looked at the people that the country nurtured. After all, their previous accumulations had already been exhausted after they entered the man-wheel level, so their cultivation speed would be very slow. He had long wanted to get pointers from Rinpoche and the Empress, but the two of them often didn't go to Messier 87 for a few months. This time around, he took this opportunity to pull them over. This was especially so for the Empress. She came from a blessed land, and her strength far exceeded the limits of a human. If she could give him some pointers, he would be able to avoid a lot of detours. After understanding Yongsan's thoughts, Rinpoche turned his head and looked at the Empress. He saw that she was in a daze and did not know what she was thinking about. Rinpoche reckoned that she was still thinking about Qi Jiayu. After driving for about 2 hours, they finally arrived at their destination. It was a villa district. There was a very large courtyard in front of villa in the corner. In the middle of the courtyard was an arena that was surrounded by many people of all ages and genders. Some of them were holding weapons wrapped in cloth. From the shape, one could roughly tell that they were sabers or swords. There were also some that were wrapped so tightly that one couldn't tell what they were. One of them was a middle-aged man in a traditional Chinese suit. He had short hair and looked very energetic. His eyes were extremely lively when he closed them. Yongsun led Rinpoche and the Empress down, and someone immediately led them to the side to sit down. Director Yang. The people nearby greeted him in a low voice. Their voices weren't loud. After all, Yongsun was an official, and it wasn't good to make a big fuss in this kind of place. After waiting for a long time, a group of people came out of the villa. One of them was tall and had a square face. His eyes were extremely lively, and he had a slight smile on his face. This person stood in the crowd and was the most eye-catching. Everyone sat down in the arena. Just now, someone went up to the stage to speak. Today, many people have gathered here. I believe it's because of the recent news. Senior Bai has mastered the martial arts of various sects and has finally taken another step forward on the path of the predecessors. After listening to the first 2 sentences, Rinpoche started to feel a little bored. To put it bluntly, he was just bragging about his own achievements and then opening up the arena to meet the heroes. Will Senior Bai publicize this kind of martial arts? Someone in the surrounding crowd suddenly asked. As soon as this was said, a group of people immediately followed suit. After all, these people weren't here to fight in the arena, but to find a way to break through the limits. The person on the stage smiled faintly before continuing. If other people obtained this kind of martial arts, they naturally wouldn't publicize it. However, as the founder, Senior Bai is magnanimous and doesn't care about sectarian bias. He is willing to publicize his many years of painstaking efforts and compile the martial scripture together with everyone. Following that, there was another uproar. Many people were asking what exactly this meant. It turned out that this time, not only did this person invite the heroes, but he also wanted to invite them to compile the martial scripture together with the martial arts of various sects into it. As soon as this was said, the people below the stage immediately hesitated. Senior Bai, as the world's most powerful person, is willing to publicize this kind of martial arts and compile it into the martial scripture. Could it be that everyone still wants to retain the sectarian bias? That person on the stage asked. The world's most powerful person? Who admits it? Someone suddenly shouted from below. When Ren Bachyan heard this, he finally perked up. Finally, there was going to be some excitement. He didn't come here to watch them have a big meeting. That so-called senior Bai wasn't angry after hearing this. He stood up from his seat, and the joints in his body cracked. Then he flashed and landed on the stage. His graceful movements attracted a lot of cheers. We can talk about the martial scripture later. This time, I invited everyone because I want to see the experts of this world. I wonder who would like to come up and have a look? The middle-aged man on the stage said in a clear voice. In his heart, he calculated that no matter what, there would definitely be objections. He would first show his martial arts on the stage and let them see it. Then, the rest would be much easier to discuss. He was still confident in his own martial arts. It wasn't that he looked down on the heroes of the world. In his eyes, except for him, everyone else was mediocre. I'll go. Immediately, someone jumped onto the stage. My name is Yang Huai, and I'm just a nobody. I want to see what the so-called world's most powerful person is capable of. The person who jumped onto the stage was a man in his early 30s with a very vigorous aura. Cough, cough. Yang's son, who was drinking tea below, immediately coughed when he saw the person who jumped onto the stage. He whispered to the side, "You should at least let him win 2 rounds. Why is he the first to go up? You can't slap him in the face like this." Previously, this Bai Yuhe was very arrogant. Yang Huai has been suppressing his anger for a long time to teach him a lesson. The person beside him whispered. When Ren Bachyan saw Yang Sen's reaction, he immediately knew that this was a nurtured expert. At this moment, he was in high spirits. After all, he was also a manual expert, and he really wanted to see what the other manual experts were like, especially on Earth. He grew up reading wuxia novels and wuxia movies. He had always been curious about martial arts, such as Xingyi Quan, Liuhe Quan, Taiji Quan, and Bagwazang. Chapter 427. Ren Bachyan focused his attention on the stage and waited to see the standard of the two. Although he wasn't very strong, he still had some eyesight. After all, in Dayo, spirit wheel experts were everywhere, and earth wheel experts were inferior to dogs. He had seen many people with such strength, so his eyesight had also improved. Yang Huai didn't reveal anything when he jumped onto the stage. It was obvious that he didn't want his opponent to see his standard and was aiming to slap him in the face. Bai Yuhe was indeed fooled. Number 1 in the world. Although it's a compliment, I think I'm worthy of it. Bai Yuhe smiled. Although his tone was plain, the arrogance in his words couldn't be concealed. After all, he had advanced the martial arts of the predecessors by a huge step. This was something that many people couldn't achieve. Just this point alone was enough for him to be proud of. Unfortunately, he was wrong from the start. Times had changed. He had stayed in the mountains for decades to practice the peerless martial arts, but he fell behind the times the moment he came out. We'll know after we try. Yang Huai stood opposite him and said. Everyone below was attentively waiting to see the match between the two. Both of them cupped their fists and greeted each other. This was etiquette. No matter what they thought, they still had to have basic etiquette. Martial ethics and etiquette had always been a part of traditional culture and were deeply ingrained in everyone's bones. After greeting each other, Bai Yuhe stretched out one hand and got into a half stance. He was waiting for his opponent to attack. He had made up his mind to win this first match beautifully. If both of them fought for half a day and barely won, he wouldn't be able to show off his skills. Seeing his stance, Yang Huai moved his feet and punched his opponent's chest. This punch whistled through the air, and Bai Yuhe was shocked. He couldn't see anything before, but from this punch, he could immediately tell that his opponent's strength wasn't much weaker than his. How is this possible? Bai Yuhe was shocked. He had reached this stage through deducing techniques and believed that he was far superior to the practitioners of today. How is it possible that someone who jumped onto the stage was at the same level as him? However, he didn't slow down at all and immediately exchanged blows with his opponent. The two of them exchanged a few blows, and everyone below became nervous. Whether it was speed or strength, the two of them were far superior to everyone else. The people below admitted that if they were the ones up there, they would probably be defeated within 2 blows. Although the strength of a man-wheel expert was only at the standard of an ordinary person in Dayo, it was actually far superior. One had to know that the strength of a man-wheel expert was between 500 to 1,500 kilograms. Some gifted individuals could even exceed this amount. This is the strength of the arms. Previously, both of them had a much better foundation than Rinpoche. After attaining the man-wheel level, their strength was now around 700 to 800 kilograms, which was far beyond what an ordinary person could compare with. In terms of speed, they were much faster than ordinary people. Ordinary people would not be able to see their movements clearly. For a time, they could only hear the sound of their bodies colliding. It was within everyone's expectations that Bai Yuha possessed such strength. But the fact that Yang Huai, who had suddenly jumped onto the stage to challenge him, had such strength was beyond everyone's expectations. Immediately, many people started asking around, which sect did this person come from? Who was his master? How could no one have heard of such an expert? Many people started to rejoice in Bai Yuha's misfortune. Bai Yuha had just ascended the stage, and he had already encountered such an expert. This was going to be interesting. Their physical fitness was about the same. What mattered now was the level of their punches and kicks. Although Bai Yuha was a little arrogant, his wisdom could be seen from the fact that he was able to advance the martial arts of his predecessors by a huge step. Not only was he proficient in martial arts, but his punches and kicks were also extremely skilled. After exchanging 7 or 8 blows, Bai Yuha's arm was like a huge spear as he blocked Yang Huai's crotch, sending him flying off the stage. Good skills. Bai Yuha only stopped and praised Yang Huai after sending him off the stage. Let me try to. The other person immediately jumped onto the stage and asked, "Do you want to take a break?" Bai Yuha cupped his fists and said, "Let's begin." As the two of them exchanged blows, Bai Yuha's face immediately turned strange. This person's strength was actually about the same as his and wasn't any weaker than the previous opponent. Where did these two experts come from? Bai Yuha guessed. What made him even more puzzled was the other party's strength and speed. He had only reached this level after breaking through that boundary. So how did they achieve it? After another 7 or 8 blows, Bai Yuha threw his opponent off the stage. Without waiting for him to catch his breath, another person jumped onto the stage. Let me try to. Bai Yuha was speechless. This person's strength was actually about the same as his, and the difference between them was actually only in terms of punches and kicks. They were actually about the same in terms of physical fitness that he was most proud of, which allowed him to break through the boundary. How could he not be shocked? Previously, when the first and second people were fighting, he thought that they were exceptionally talented and would walk the same path as him. However, when 3 people like them jumped onto the stage consecutively, he began to feel that something was wrong. Not only did he feel that something was wrong, but the others also felt that something was wrong. These 3 people were all young, around 25 to 30 years old. Moreover, judging from their moves, they were obviously not from the same sect, yet they all had such strength. How could the audience not be suspicious? When the 4th person jumped onto the stage, Bai Yuha began to ponder what exactly went wrong. When the 4th person was beaten off the stage, he had no choice but to rest on the stage for a while, and his expression began to fluctuate. He believed that his achievements had already surpassed those of his predecessors and far surpassed those of his generation. As soon as he left the mountain, he couldn't wait to challenge the outstanding heroes. He didn't expect 4 such experts to come up one after another. Were there too many experts in this world, or was he too weak? What exactly was going on? He began to doubt himself. Could it be that something big had happened in the outside world, that someone had already broken through to this level and announced it? However, as far as he knew, such a thing hadn't happened in the past few days. But what was going on now? After he had rested enough, a 5th person jumped onto the stage. This person was actually slightly stronger than the previous 4. This time, the 2 of them exchanged 30 to 40 moves, and he barely won by 1 move. Then, a 6th person jumped onto the stage. Bai Yuha's face turned ashen. It wasn't that he couldn't beat them. He thought that he was already the #1 expert in the world after breaking through to this level. He didn't expect that a few random people who jumped on a stage would all be this strong. Was the world changing too quickly? Or was he ignorant? Could it be that everyone in the outside world was this strong? Wasn't his actions a joke? He wasn't the only one who felt this way. The audience felt the same way as well. They weren't blind, and they could naturally tell that the people who were fighting on the stage were stronger than them. It was easy to understand if one or two of such people appeared, but when so many of them appeared at once, they began to wonder if they were useless. The nation had nurtured these people through Run Bachien's martial arts. This time, they only wanted to give Bayuha a slap in the face, but they didn't expect that they would destroy the confidence of Bayuha and the others. This person isn't bad, Ren Bachien whispered to young Senator. It was already very impressive that he was able to create a method to break through to the man-will level by integrating the methods of the predecessors. After all, creating a new path was the most difficult. Such a person wouldn't be lost in the crowd, no matter where he went. If it wasn't for Ren Bachien's martial arts, he would probably be able to advance the martial arts on Earth by a huge step. Moreover, he was also very good at fighting. Indeed, he's not bad. Yang Sen nodded. This kind of talent needed to be absorbed into the nation. Even though he asked Ren Bachien and the Empress to help look after the others, he himself was here to observe Bayuha. However, before absorbing him into the organization, he still had to destroy his arrogance. At this moment, Bayuha had beaten the 8th person off the stage, and a self-deprecating look appeared on his face. He originally thought that he was the #1 expert in the world, but he didn't expect that any random person would be at his level. What was the point of fighting? Perhaps even a 10-year-old child would jump out and be as strong as him. Thinking back to his decades of hard work and the ecstasy he felt from every step he took, he thought that this was the scenery of his journey to the peak. Now, looking at it again, it seemed like a joke. It was better to go back to farming. He fought 8 matches and won 8 of them. However, this self-proclaimed #1 expert who had trained hard for decades was the first to despair. Chapter 428. I don't want to fight anymore. Bayuha looked at the 9th person who jumped onto the stage with a face full of despair. There was no need to fight anymore. Why? Are you afraid? The 9th person who jumped onto the stage was a woman, and she looked at him coldly. I made a fool of myself. It turns out that I'm just a frog at the bottom of a well. I'd better return to the mountains. Bayuha ignored her and waved his hand to the crowd. Everyone could see his desolation. It was better to return to the mountains to farm. This time, it was better not to go down the mountains. The so-called martial arts were just a joke. Everyone was like this, but he was still complacent and thought that he had reached a level that his predecessors couldn't reach. These 9 people made him completely lose interest. Even if he defeated the 9th person, there would still be the 10th, the 11th, the 100th. In fact, after the first person appeared, there was no longer any value for him to compete. The crowd below didn't have much of a reaction to Bayuha's words. This was because, apart from this group of experts trained by the nation, the others were also deeply doubtful. They doubted whether they had lived their entire lives as dogs. When did this world become like this? Their martial arts were even worse than Bayuha's, and they were extremely moved when they heard that Bayuha had broken through the limits of his predecessors. In particular, the skills that Bayuha displayed during the fight were enough to convince them that what he said was true. However, what was going on with these people who jumped onto the stage one after another? Regardless of their moves or experience, the strength and speed that they displayed surpassed them and reached the same level as Bayuha. One had to know that they were famous experts in the martial arts world. This time, Bayuha invited all the heroes and naturally invited famous people. However, what was going on with those people just now? All of them were experts who surpassed them, and all of them were unknown. Where did they pop out from? Could be that Bayuha was just a paper tiger? Some people threw away the thought as soon as it popped into their heads. After all, both sides were fighting on the stage, and the people below weren't blind. Not to mention anything else, everyone could see the power and speed of both sides when they fought. The 8 fights on the stage made the people below start to doubt their lives. Could it be that the world was filled with such experts, and they were the only weaklings? Rinpoche looked at Bayuha, who exuded a bleak aura as he walked down the stage and entered the villa without looking back. Rinpoche felt a little sympathy for him. Actually, this person was quite powerful. He was able to advance his cultivation technique by a huge step. This was not something that just anyone could do. What a pity. How's it? Are you interested in giving me some pointers? Yang Sun smiled at Rinpoche. On the surface, it seemed that Rinpoche's skills were similar to those people from before. They were all at the man-wheel level, and this was easily discovered by the nation. However, Yang Sun had confidence in Rinpoche. After all, Rinpoche had traveled between Earth and the Blessed Enclave. His experience and martial arts were definitely not something these people could compare to. Forget it. Rinpoche shook his head. Even though he had practiced the Fist of Death, other than being ravaged by little Lolita, he didn't have much experience in fighting. It would be fine if they could use their guns, but it was obvious that they couldn't shoot in the arena. It mattered if TTT Havel TB. It was fine if he couldn't beat someone in that world, but if he was beaten up on Earth, it would be too shameful to expose himself in front of the country. Rinpoche didn't have much confidence in close combat. It was better for him to go back and train hard for 30 to 50 years. By then, these people would have died of old age. Although he was a little cowardly, martial arts had never been his forte. In 2 years, he would have reached the earth wheel level. At that time, he would be able to hang them up with one hand. Only a fool would compete with him now. Coward. Someone beside Yang Sun sneered softly. In fact, when Yang Sun and Rinpoche were talking, they had been paying attention and guessing Rinpoche's identity. They were a little dissatisfied when Yang Sun asked him to give them pointers. However, Rinpoche's refusal made them look down on him. Rinpoche tilted his head to take a look. It was a young man in his late 20s who was looking at him provocatively. Rinpoche slowly took out his pistol and pointed it at him. You might die if I punch you. Yang Sun, the rest, that was a gun in his hand. Even an immortal wouldn't be able to escape from a gun fired at such a close range. What do you mean by, I might die if I punch you? How could it be like this? Mr. Ren, Yang Sun didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I'm just joking. Rinpoche laughed. What era are we living in? What's the point of practicing martial arts? It's to strengthen the body, not to be brave and ruthless. We are the successors of socialism. What we have to do is to work hard for the 4 modernizations. Fighting and killing is too outrageous. Yang Sun, it seems like you're the only one who kills people's families. How dare you say this? In fact, I have been waiting since I was a child for my motherland to call me as its successor. However, it hasn't happened yet. Rinpoche recalled his many years of waiting and felt somewhat regretful. You will be the prince consort of Dayo in the future. What successor are you talking about? The Empress was originally in a daze. When she suddenly heard Rinpoche talk about successor, she immediately became dissatisfied. I'm just joking. Rinpoche grabbed her hand and squeezed it. The Empress squeezed it back. Rinpoche's hand swelled visibly. Yang Sun was slightly taken aback. The Empress's words revealed a lot of things. Previously, when Rinpoche wanted weapons for war, he already knew that there were countries and wars in the Grotto Heaven world. Furthermore, this Madame Chi should be someone from that country. Rinpoche would be a prince consort in the future, which meant that his status in the Grotto Heaven world wouldn't be low. Yang Sun thought about it and felt that this was important news. The higher Rinpoche's status in that world, the more valuable he was. Rinpoche turned his head and said, "Let's go. I still want to hear about the progress that you told me previously." Seeing that he said this, Yang Sun didn't force him. He informed the people beside him, got up, and left with Rinpoche. Mr. Run, is your hand all right? Yang Sun asked when he saw that Rinpoche's hand was swollen like a pig's trotter. It's fine. I'm used to it. Rinpoche looked calm. Wasn't it just a little swollen? It was painful, and it wouldn't hurt anymore. When Rinpoche followed Yang Sun back, the sky was already dark. He rejected Yang Sun's invitation to have a meal and first want to understand the recent progress in the laboratory. There was a lot of progress. After all, with the help of supercomputers and various modern instruments, the progress of various research projects couldn't be compared to the past. In the past, it would take half a lifetime to calculate, verify, or discover things. Now, it would only take a few days or even a few hours. What caught Rinpoche's attention the most were the martial arts manuals and the tests for man-wheel experts. With these man-wheel experts, the progress in the deduction of the martial arts manuals was very fast. The 4 sets of martial arts manuals that Rinpoche brought had basically been optimized by the laboratory. The cultivation methods were more reasonable and simple. Of course, this was also related to the fact that the martial arts manuals that Rinpoche brought were very simple. These simple martial arts manuals didn't involve many aspects, didn't have great potential, and were easier to modify. After the optimization of the laboratory, these simple martial arts manuals were much stronger than before. If the full score was 5 points, these martial arts manuals were originally 2 points for power, 2 points for cultivation speed, and 2 points for potential. After the optimization, they actually reached 5 points in all aspects, which was a forceful upgrade. Rinpoche couldn't help but admire this kind of progress. He even wanted to hand over his Rui visualization. Another thing that Rinpoche was concerned about was the discovery of a few new substances in the blood of the man-wheel experts cultivated in the country. One of them was an amine molecule. The laboratory named it polypropylamine, which was distributed in the blood of man-wheel experts. Its biggest function was to transform a portion of the nutrient-carrying molecules in the blood into another substance. Chapter 429. The progress made by the Messier 87 department over the past few months made Rinpoche very happy. Although the martial arts in that world were of a high level and had their own cultivation system, they lacked the scientific research on Earth that fundamentally solved all aspects of cultivation. Given more time, when martial arts entered the army, schools, and society, Earth would enter the era of cultivation. That kind of future could be anticipated. Since martial arts already existed, it couldn't be hidden from people. There would be people practicing cultivation techniques everywhere, and the shape of the entire society would definitely change. Everyone would be impacted by this wave of change. There were some good aspects, such as the national football team finally being saved. More likely, it would cause various social problems after people gained power. However, the nation would definitely formulate a comprehensive plan to adapt to the new social form. Rinpoche didn't need to consider these things, as it was something that the nation needed to consider. He was happy to see such a situation. This world had been peaceful for too long, and such changes would bring about an interesting future. As for whether such a future would have an impact on his and the Empress's current status, he wasn't worried. He was the one who stood at the peak of this era, the one who stood at the tip of the wave. Everything started with him. As for the nation, as long as the Empress advanced to longevity heaven, even if Earth was full of Earth wheel experts, she would still be a deterrent to everyone. However, there was still a long way to go before Earth wheel experts could be found everywhere. Currently, the biggest restriction on Earth wasn't only martial arts, but also food and the environment. Unless Earth also had food that was full of vitality like the other world, it would take a long time to reach the Earth wheel level, even if one was talented. After walking around the Messier 87 department, Rinpoche took all kinds of information and returned to the villa with the Empress. There was no need to care about Earth for the time being. It would be difficult to reach the level that he wanted to see in a short period of time. As for the information, he had to keep it. The research information on cultivation on Earth was also useful to that world. Perhaps he would talk about scientific cultivation in the future. That sounded good. For the next 2 days, the Empress played with her new phone in the villa. She liked this kind of phone that could be wrapped around her wrist like a watch and could also be used as an electronic watch. Zxiao, what are you playing? Rinpoche came over to look at the screen after cooking and found that it was a game. I think it's called Kings of Glory. Just now, when she was fiddling with her phone, she saw the advertisement for Honor of Kings and was suddenly attracted to the characters in the advertisement. It's time to eat. Rinpoche smiled. He wasn't worried that the Empress would be tricked by others in the game and want to exterminate her entire clan. This was because the Empress was definitely the one who would set others up. Be prepared to fight 4 against 5 if you're in the same team as her. After dinner, the two of them sat on the sofa and played Honor of Kings. A few minutes later, 3 people thousands of miles away almost smashed their phones. Encountering one bad teammate was bad enough, let alone 2. Under the night sky, the two of them hid in the brightly lit villa and played tricks on each other, which made them feel very happy. After staying on Earth for a few days, the two of them returned to Dayo. Rinpoche divided the students into 5 groups, assigned them tasks, and got them to enter Tianjing Basin separately. The so-called tasks were to let them use their own eyes to observe the living conditions and social patterns of the remnant citizens of the Han Nation, understand their thoughts, and think about how to deal with them. They had never learned these things. Rinpoche wanted them to seriously understand the parts of this nation that most people didn't understand and think about it for themselves. Regardless of whether what they saw, thought, and got matched up with Rinpoche's ideas, this was a very important part of their lives. Running an educational institute to educate people wasn't just about teaching, but also about educating people. Teacher, we are setting off. The next day, everyone bade farewell to Rinpoche at the residence. The tasks that Rinpoche arranged for them made them somewhat excited. This was the first time that they left their familiar environment to do something that seemed to have a profound meaning. According to what Rinpoche said at that time, what they saw and got would affect the future of tens of millions of people. Be careful, Rinpoche couldn't help but say as he looked at the familiar young faces in the courtyard. Although these students were at least at the Manwheel level, there was at least one student in each team who was at the Earthwheel level. With this kind of strength, they should be able to protect themselves. However, Rinpoche was still somewhat worried. After all, these were only half-grown children. The oldest was only 18 years old, and the youngest was only 11 years old. Don't worry. If anyone dares to cause trouble, I will twist his head off and kick it like a ball, Du Laolu said as he patted his chest. Don't let anyone twist your head off, someone immediately said with a laugh. Who dares? Have you seen a big fist? Du Laolu raised his fist and threatened. Trash. Little Lolita looked at him sideways with a face full of contempt. It's better to be careful, Rinpoche said faintly. Killing someone doesn't just require a knife. If someone has their eyes on you, they can knock all of you out with a bag of knockout drugs. When that happens, I won't send anyone to save you. I can't afford to lose face. Moreover, even if I wanted to save you, your life and death might not be in your control, and I might not be able to save you. Although Tianjing Basin is also in Dayo, it's different from what you know. The people there are more complicated. Yes, I understand. After hearing what Rinpoche said, everyone became much more serious. Let's set off, Rinpoche said with his hands behind his back as he watched the students leave the courtyard with smiles on their faces. I hope they are safe, Rinpoche said softly as he watched them leave. After all, he had taught these students for a few months and had some feelings for them. Rinpoche didn't want them to return with fewer people. Although he arranged for 2 guards to follow behind each team, it might not be foolproof. After another day, Rinpoche bade farewell to the Empress and left the city. This time, Rinpoche didn't bring too many things. He only brought a pistol, a rifle, a few grenades, and Lin Xiaola, who was sleeping soundly in the carriage. She should be able to guarantee his safety. After all, the people in Tianjing Basin were all remnant citizens of the Han Nation. Bringing along Aboriginal guards would more or less attract attention and could easily expose his identity. Rinpoche and Lin Xiaola weren't Aboriginals, so it might be less dangerous for the two of them to be in Tianjing Basin. However, the biggest problem facing Rinpoche now was how to make the 2 fork-horned cows that were pulling the carriage walk in a straight line. Not long after he left the city, he saw these 2 fellows running into the forest at the side. Stop! Stop! Rinpoche whipped the fork-horned cows, and they ran even faster. Chapter 430. The ancients had a good saying, the chariot overturned before the victory was achieved, causing the hero to shed tears. Rinpoche felt that this saying was very true. The ancients were very powerful and always made sense. This was the situation he was in now. Before he could even travel 500 meters out of the city, the chariot overturned, and Rinpoche was covered in grass juice. The two stupid oxen were still eating grass indifferently. If he didn't have to rely on them as a means of transportation, he would have eaten beef tonight. Lin Xiaola climbed out of the chariot with sleepy eyes. She turned her head and looked around before asking in confusion, "How did the chariot overturn?" "Don't talk. Lift the chariot back to the road first," Rinpoche said helplessly. Lin Xiaola lifted the chariot with one hand, and Rinpoche dragged the two fork-horned cows back to the road before continuing. "When are we having dinner? You eat when you wake up and sleep when you are full. Why don't you take a look at how fat you are?" Rinpoche said disdainfully. That being said, Lin Xiaola wasn't fat at all. Not only was she not fat, but she was also very thin and weak. She didn't look like other experts who were full of vigor and heroic. No one could tell that she was actually an expert. "It doesn't matter if you're fat," Lin Xiaola said indifferently as she rubbed her chest. "What are you doing?" Rinpoche was amused by her actions. That flat chest of hers was the same regardless of whether she rubbed it or not. Lin Xiaola looked down and said confidently, "This is called stepping on breasts. I have it in my memory, and it seems to work. You need talent to step on breasts. Without you, what else can you step on?" Rinpoche stabbed her in the heart. "If I step on it for another 50 years, I will definitely be able to step on it." Lin Xiaola wasn't discouraged at all. Rinpoche was speechless. "Your way of calculating time might be different from the average person. When are you going to be an adult?" Rinpoche felt a headache when he thought about how she was still underage at the age of 40 or 50. This kind of inhuman lifespan was really enviable. It should be about 50 years, a lifespan that made people envious and jealous. If he sent her to the laboratory, he didn't know if she could be developed to extend her lifespan. He would try to get a bottle of blood next time. Not long after the two of them walked forward, the road began to descend. After making a turn, they arrived at a winding mountain road. From their current position to the flat ground at the bottom, there was a distance of 700 to 800 meters. In the distance, there was an endless wilderness, a dense forest, and a city within their field of vision. That was today's destination, the first city after entering Tianjin Basin, Longzhou City. Behind Longzhou City was a winding mountain range. It was said that there was an earth dragon in Tianjin Basin that was coiled up. The dragon's head was facing the outside of Tianjin Basin as if it was going to soar into the sky and pounce toward the north. The saying that obtaining Tianjin Basin was equivalent to obtaining the world wasn't unrelated to this earth dragon. Longzhou City was located at the head of this earth dragon. Of course, this was what the Hao Nation said. The Aboriginals did not pay attention to this. There was a checkpoint at both ends of the winding mountain road. Once these two checkpoints were blocked, more than 10 million Remet citizens of the Hao Nation would be locked in Tianjin Basin. Rinpoche took out his clearance token, and the checkpoint was naturally opened. After exiting the checkpoint, there was an endless plain in front of them. A dirt road extended from the checkpoint all the way to the city in the distance, which was almost invisible at this time. At this time, there were many ox carts coming and going on this road. There were caravans going to and fro Gu City, and Rinpoche and Lin Xiaola weren't conspicuous among them. If there was anything worth noticing, it would be that the other carts going from Gu City to Longzhou City were filled with all kinds of goods, while their cart was empty. From the marks left by the wheels and the sound of the ox cart driving on the road, it could be seen that it was empty. Therefore, Rinpoche didn't try to chat with the merchants next to him, as it would be too easy for them to detect something suspicious. Therefore, his attention was focused on the large tracts of farmland on both sides of the road, as well as the farmers who were working in the farmland. Rinpoche noticed that the farming tools used by the farmers were almost all made of stone with wooden handles attached to the ends. Just like outside, a kitchen knife could be regarded as a family heirloom. Iron farming tools were too extravagant for the aboriginals and the remnant citizens of the Hao Nation. The remnant citizens of the Hao Nation that Rinpoche met previously were mostly merchants. Even though their statuses weren't high, they weren't considered poor either. However, Rinpoche could see a lot of things from these farmers. At the very least, the living conditions of these remnant citizens of the Hao Nation probably weren't very good. Even though these farmers weren't sallow and emaciated, their clothes could be said to be ragged, and their clothes were full of puddings of various sizes. The most important thing was the vitality of these farmers, which gave people the feeling that they were walking corpses and had no vitality at all. Sure enough, you have to see it with your own eyes to know, Rinpoche said softly. There's a red lollipop in your bag. Give me one. I haven't eaten that before, and I have to eat it with my own mouth to know. Lin Shaola immediately followed up with his words. Be careful of tooth decay. Rinpoche took out a handful of lollipops from his pocket. Lin Shaola's eyes widened. Here's a red one. Rinpoche took one out and threw it to Lin Shaola. Stingy, Lin Shaola watched as Rinpoche put away that handful of lollipops and almost stretched out her claws to scratch him. Lin Shaola carefully tore off the wrapper of the lollipop and neatly folded it before putting it in her pocket. She had been collecting these things recently. By the way, what are you doing here? She finally remembered to ask about the purpose of her visit. I'm here to check on their situation and see how to make them behave, Rinpoche said as he pointed to the farmers in the farmland. Did they provoke you? I will help you beat them up. Just give me a piece of lollipop for each person I beat up, Lin Shaola said in astonishment. The next time we start a war with Great Xia, can I just let you out? Rinpoche turned his head to look at this cheap expert and felt like he was closing the door and releasing a dog. I can't beat an army, Lin Shaola immediately replied. If she were to barge into an army, she might not be able to escape. Even though Great Xia couldn't withstand a single blow from the aboriginals, it was because they had the winged cavalry, which had thousands of earth wheel experts. If it was just her, she would probably be torn apart by others. We can only bully the farmers. Is there a need for you? Rinpoche squinted his eyes and said with disdain. That's true. Lin Shaola was still thin-skinned. After thinking about it, she felt that what Rinpoche said made sense and didn't mention it again. When it was close to evening, the two of them finally arrived at Longzhou City along the dirt road. While Rinpoche was waiting for the inspection, he carefully sized up the guards at the lower city gate. They were dressed in leather armor, were generally thin, and had long swords hanging from their waists. Before coming here, he already knew that these swords were all bone swords. Let's see what's in the carriage. When it was their turn, one of the guards came to open the curtain. When he saw that there was only one box inside, his eyes lit up. Normally, when one returned from Gu City, it would be filled with all kinds of items. Since there was only one box, it meant that the items inside were valuable. His heart immediately lit up. Open the box. Rinpoche stuffed a handful of silver fragments into his hand. If it's really opened, you won't be able to get these. The guards of Longzhou City were very greedy. After all, there were only trade caravans coming and going, and there was only one route. Even if those merchants had complaints, they had no choice but to pass through here. Naturally, the guards would unscrupulously plunder the riches. Rinpoche already knew about this before coming here, so he wasn't surprised. Rinpoche's words made the expression on the guard's face freeze. Just like what Rinpoche said, if there were valuable items in the carriage, even if he asked for more money, they wouldn't belong to him. It was better to accept while he was ahead. This handful of silver fragments was equivalent to a month's worth of riches. Chapter 4:31. Rinpoche sat on the ox cart and looked at the buildings and pedestrians on both sides of the road. It was a completely unfamiliar environment, and he felt like he was on a tour. Most of the buildings in Longzhou City were made of wood or pillars. The buildings were dilapidated, and the closer they were to the city gate, the more so. Many children in old clothes or with bare buttocks were running around or biting their dirty fingers while looking at him. Regardless of where one was, rich or poor, children were always full of energy. One could see many more things from the faces of adults. After looking around, Rinpoche felt that the ordinary residents weren't doing too well, whether it was in terms of clothes, complexion, or mental outlook. Their clothes were shabby, and they gave off a numb feeling. They didn't smile much. As he walked deeper into the city, the buildings on both sides of the road were in better condition. There were also some flowers and plants outside the houses on both sides of the road as decorations. Rinpoche first saw the word guest and only saw the name of the inn when he got closer. It was indeed worthy of being the largest inn chain in the martial arts world. It had even opened in Dayo, another world. "Boss, 2 top-class rooms," Rinpoche shouted as he walked into the courtyard. This was how it was played on television. "What's a good room?" The lady boss in front of the counter raised her head, and the moment she opened her mouth, a strong smell came out of her mouth. She was quite pretty. Although her forehead was a little big, she had curved eyebrows and almond-shaped eyes. She looked like she was in her 30s and looked charming. "Top-class room, the best room." Rinpoche's face fell as he got off to a bad start. "Nyoe are 2 A-class rooms." The lady boss shouted first before smiling at Rinpoche and saying, "Customer, your words are quite interesting. Are you from afar?" "Yes, from the Yun Nation." Rinpoche nodded. This was his identity this time. He and Lin Shaola didn't look like the remnant citizens of the Han Nation, but more like the people of the Yun Nation and Great Xia. "Are you still at war? Was the journey easy?" the lady boss asked. "Yes. The road is not easy, and it took a lot of effort. There's an ox cart outside, and I'll rush into the courtyard first." Rinpoche went out to bring the ox cart in. The lady boss leaned against the door and watched his movements. Her eyes flickered, and when she saw how he tied the cow to the stable, she was slightly puzzled. The way they tied the rope didn't seem to be done by the people of the Yun Nation. Instead, it seemed to be done by the Aboriginals. The people of the Yun Nation liked to wear Qingyun buckles, while the Aboriginals wore 3-ring buckles on their mounts. Rinpoche watched how the guards tied their mounts to the tree every day. Naturally, he was used to their method and didn't feel that there was anything wrong with it. When Rinpoche looked up at her, she smiled again. "Have we arrived?" When he opened the curtain, she groaned and slowly crawled out as if she didn't have any bones. After she came out, she asked Rinpoche to carry her suitcase. Then, the 2 of them were led by the waiter to their rooms. There were 2 adjacent rooms on the 2nd floor. On the way upstairs, the landlady asked lazily, "Is there nothing else in the car? If you lose it, I won't take responsibility." "No more. You've brought very little with you." The room was clean. After all, this was Longsho City, the first city after entering the basin. There were many merchants coming and going, and the inns were well maintained. "Let's go out for a walk." Rinpoche kicked Lin Shaola, who was paralyzed on the bed the moment she entered the room. "Oh." Rinpoche expressionlessly took out a lollipop, waved it in front of her, and then threw it at the door. A gust of wind blew past, and she appeared at the door. Sure enough, lollipops weren't omnipotent, but it was impossible not to have lollipops. Rinpoche then opened the suitcase, took out a grenade, put it in his money bag, and hung it on his waist. He heard that there were many pickpockets here. Then, he locked the suitcase and left the room. "Landlady, don't let anyone enter our room," Rinpoche said. "Don't worry. If anyone enters, I'll break his claws." Not long after Rinpoche left, the landlady went upstairs, opened the door, and entered. She took out a wire and poked it twice in the lock. After opening the suitcase, she saw a pile of bullets, a dozen grenades, a rifle, and a few books. She first picked up the books and flipped through them. She realized that the handwriting on them was unrecognizable. She then carefully looked at the grenades and bullets, and finally put them back into the suitcase before locking it. Rinpoche brought Lin Shaola out of the room. With his hands behind his back, he walked toward the center of the city while sizing up the shops on both sides. There were all kinds of cloth shops, salt shops, medicine shops, rice shops, and clothing shops. There were all kinds of things that should be there. People were going in and out of the shops, and it looked very lively. After standing at the side and watching for a while, Rinpoche knew what kind of people were going in and out of these shops. Many of them carried a bag or a few bags of things when they came out and placed them on a cart or carried them on a bamboo stick. They didn't look like ordinary people, but more like small vendors in other cities. They bought the things they needed at a low price here and then went to the countryside or small towns to sell them. After walking for a short distance, he smelled a fragrance that filled his nose. He followed the smell and found someone using a stove to roast a fruit that was much bigger than lychees. After roasting for a while, the shell would crack and emit a fragrant smell. "How much is it?" Rinpoche asked. "3 for 1 copper coin." Rinpoche turned his head to look at Lin Xiaola, who was beside him. Her saliva was dripping down her neck and into her clothes. "Give me 30. Rinpoche threw over a tael of silver. The shell was very hot. When the shell was peeled off, the golden flesh was revealed. It tasted a little like a coconut. It was a little chewy, but it tasted pretty good. For the rest of the journey, Lin Xiaola held bag after bag of snacks and couldn't stop eating. "Get out of the way, get out of the way." The sound of hooves could be heard. A few people in long robes rode on short horses and galloped across the street, causing a little commotion. "Who are they?" Rinpoche stood by the side of the road and asked a vendor. "Customer, are you from afar?" "They are from the Nine-Blade sect. Don't provoke them, and it will be fine." The vendor laughed. "Galloping on a horse in the city, and no one cares?" Rinpoche asked. "Don't talk nonsense. The Nine-Blade sect is quite powerful in this area. If someone hears you, be careful not to cause trouble for you," the vendor hurriedly said. "So, overbearing?" "I didn't say anything. I just wanted to ask if anyone cares about such a situation." Rinpoche raised his eyebrows and threw a tael of silver to the vendor. "Please clear my doubts. We are from another place, and we need to get a feel of the place first so that we don't provoke people we shouldn't provoke. Customer, you will understand after staying for a while. Many of the city guards are disciples of the Nine-Blade sect, and there are also many people from the Public Order Bureau. As long as there is nothing wrong, naturally no one cares about them," the vendor said softly as he looked around. Rinpoche threw another tael of silver over and heard a lot of information from the vendor. Within the boundaries of Longzhou City, the most powerful force wasn't the prefecture chief who controlled the 5,000 guards, but a sect called the Golden Ring Residents. It was the biggest sect in the area of Longzhou City, Jiasai City, and Sanyuanli City. Of course, this Golden Ring Residence was only the biggest force in this area. In fact, Longzhou City belonged to one of the 3 biggest forces in this basin. As a result, even though the Golden Ring Residence was stronger than the prefecture chief in this area, they didn't dare to provoke the city chief. Of course, the city chief wouldn't provoke them either because the Golden Ring Residence wasn't just one sect. Other than these 2 forces, there were also 2 smaller sections. One was the Nine-Blade sect, and the other was the Jiangshi sect. In addition, there was a local gang called the Death Toad that controlled a group of local ruffians and thieves. They weren't very powerful, and if they were powerful, the prefecture chief of Longzhou City wouldn't tolerate them. According to the vendor, even this Death Toad wasn't someone outsiders could provoke. When outside, safety came first, and harmony was the most important. No matter who you met, you just had to lower your head, and there was no need to cause trouble. Rinpoche thanked the vendor for his kindness and continued to walk forward with Lin Xiaola. He had a rough idea of the sphere of influence in Longzhou City, but he didn't expect such a small city to have so many different forces. Compared to the area where the Aboriginals were, it was really much more chaotic. "Hey, your money bag has been stolen," Lin Xiaola said vaguely as she ate the fruit in her hand. Rinpoche touched the money bag at his waist and found that it was indeed gone. "Do you want me to help you snatch it back?" 5 lollipops. Lin Xiaola's eyes lit up. "There's no need." Rinpoche smiled. They would probably be able to hear the sound of firecrackers in a while. Other people didn't know what the function of a grenade was, but they would definitely pull it when they saw the ring on it. The 2 of them walked forward for the time it took to drink 2 cups of tea before they heard a loud boom coming from another direction. You're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.